The extraordinary variety of plants and animals on Earth make our planet unique. In its harmony and balance, the spectacle of nature is born of an age-old evolution that has endured almost as long as the Earth itself. To date, scientists have discovered nearly 2 million species. But this represents only 15% of life on Earth. Huge swaths of this planet's biodiversity are completely unknown, especially in our forests and oceans. Biodiversity produces oxygen, provides food for plants and animals, and helps to purify the soil and water. Our forests and oceans play an essential role in regulating climate, allowing billions of organisms to celebrate life on Earth. But this fragile balance is threatened.
Our lives depend on biological diversity. Species and ecosystems are disappearing at an unsustainable rate. We humans are the cause. We stand to lose a wide variety of environmental goods and services that we take for granted.
Researchers believe that the Earth is undergoing one of the most significant mass extinction events in its history, caused by our civilization. Our expansion is affecting the ecosystems of all other species.
We are changing our world, and species are disappearing.
As humans, we can have a drastic effect on this planet. We can't just do things and not think about the long-term consequences.
It's a serious issue. We need to change minds and change attitudes towards nature.
Human impact on biodiversity has greatly increased since the start of the Industrial Revolution during the 18th century. Massive technological and economic development have driven the expansion of our civilization across the planet. The Earth's population has grown from 700 million to 7 billion in less than 300 years. Worldwide, humanity has become a phenomenal force. Greenhouse gas levels have not been this high for over 1 million years. We have stripped large predators of their territories by confining them to reserves or by destroying the world's large forests. All over the Earth, plants and animals are increasingly struggling to coexist with humanity. Every day, nearly 130 species go extinct, probably one of the highest rates of extinction the Earth has ever seen. For several years, the oceanographic schooner Sedna IV has been sailing the world's oceans. After expeditions in the Arctic and Antarctic, its crew has now embarked on a 3-year voyage around the world. During their mission, 1,000 days for the planet, they will meet with scientists who have dedicated their lives to protecting biodiversity. Mission leader, Jean Lemire.
We set sail for Central America, a region with one of the highest diversity of species in the world. The preservation of habitats here is vital to the survival of thousands of species of fish, reptiles, and mammals. Here, the many shapes and bright colors of biodiversity stimulate our desire to protect them even more.
In Costa Rica, the team sets off in search of one of the last big cats of the Americas. These top predators in the food chain help control populations in their ecosystems. Scientists call the jaguar an umbrella species. By protecting it, the balance among all the other species that share its habitat is also protected. Unfortunately, the jaguar is threatened. Humans hunt its prey, and farms, ranches, and ever-expanding urbanization are fragmenting its territory. In less than a century, the jaguar's habitat has been cut in half. Today, it is confined to pockets of land that are becoming smaller and smaller. Maintaining connections among these pockets of land is essential to the genetic health of the species, because jaguars are part of a single extended family that stretches from Mexico to Argentina. In eastern Costa Rica, a reserve has been created to protect one of the jaguar's habitats. This is a private reserve that regularly attracts scientists such as biologist Jose Gonzalez and Jan Schipper. They have dedicated their lives to protecting these big cats.
Hey, nice spot.
Yeah. Ah, look at there, look at there.
Oh yeah.
Those are jaguar marks.
Wow, even there.
All the way up.
So that's a good spot for jaguar.
This is a perfect spot. Yeah. This is the place we're shooting.
A jaguar has marked its territory by scratching a tree.
Get sunlight direct to it, and then the lock.
Installing a motion sensing camera will record the passage of jaguars and photo ID them. Using photographs over several years, researchers have shown that the reserve is frequented by about 14 jaguars. And videos highlight the problem of jaguars coexisting with local farmers.
Oh, look at that.
Oh
What's this?
That's definitely a cow, and that looks like Cora.
Yeah, that's Cora, for sure. That's amazing.
That's amazing. Wow, see the power in his jaws?
Wow. Look at the strength of the animal.
Yeah. So I suppose that, you know, when a jaguar cut a cow like this, it brings lots of conflict.
Yeah, because that's the basis for conflict, people hunting jaguars in revenge. But on the other side, it is also a consequence of problems because people is hunting the prey base. So that's why they go out and hunt cattle, because they don't have anything else to eat.
Jaguars are more and more threatened because the increased conversion of virgin forest into livestock pasture reduces the prey available to them. The reserve has an area of about 100 square kilometers, which is not enough to support the jaguar population. Today, the reserve is bordered by a nearly continuous succession of pastures and cattle farms. The jaguars find it difficult to move among the isolated pockets of forest.
You can see there's only little patches here and there of forest with agriculture, clear-cut areas for cattle and so forth. Pastures obviously has very little value in terms of a jaguar being able to cross. So we don't necessarily need continuous virgin forest from here to the coast. We just need a mix of forest types along with different types of more sustainable agriculture to connect it. And that's a lot easier to sell that to landowners instead of saying, oh, we need to take your land away and put it in conservation.
The challenge for scientists is to protect the jaguars when they leave the reserve's boundaries. To do so, they must establish migration corridors. In this way, they hope to convince farmers to preserve sections of forest on their land that allow the big cats and their prey to move about their territory. But first, they must capture one.
So we use some pheromones to attract the animals.
By equipping a jaguar with a tracking collar, the scientists will be able to precisely monitor its movements.
And this is the trap. So it has a little mechanism like right in the bottom. We're gonna check it right now just to see if it's working fine. If jaguars disappear, what we're gonna see is just overabundance of many other species, probably changing entirely what we know as biodiversity right now. So it's a huge change that is gonna occur. That probably also works when you don't have sharks in the sea. The entire community changes.
I think that's an interesting thing.
This one piece will make 52 layers.
Watch on mobile devices or the big screen. All for free. No subscription required.
Large predators are threatened all over the world, both on land and in the ocean. In recent decades, populations of sharks, tuna, and swordfish have declined by 90% around the world. During this same period, fishing intensity has increased dramatically. More and more, ecosystems are suffering the consequences of this overexploitation. In the coral reefs of the Caribbean, large predators are increasingly rare, which has weakened ecosystems and opened up a niche for an invasive species. The lionfish. Biologist Tim Pusak of the University of Oregon has studied this phenomenon for many years.
So lionfish that naturally live in the Indo-Pacific have been taken from their home by humans, brought over to the US because people like to have them in their aquariums. They're beautiful, stunning fish. It's great to look at them. The problem is they like to eat, and they like to eat a lot. So they'll tend to eat all the other fish that are in the aquarium, and so people just release it into the ocean.
Lionfish have begun to proliferate in Caribbean waters. Genetic studies show that the population began with only 6 individuals. Scientists are now studying the consequences of their presence in the food chain.
It appears that they can eat prey items that are up to about half their body size, which is rather large. They eat every and anything they can get their mouth on. Studies have found that a single lionfish could reduce the number of small coral reef fish by about 90%, so they're having a drastic effect, much greater than any native fish would have.
The smaller fish eaten by the lionfish generally consume large amounts of algae. With no fish left to eat the algae, they proliferate to the point where they suffocate the reef. The lionfish adapted quickly to its new habitat, and this fierce predator has taken advantage of the weakened ecosystems.
Populations exploded since the 1990s and now extend throughout the Caribbean, into the Gulf of Mexico, up the eastern seaboard of the US, and working their way down the coast of South America.
The remarkable adaptation of this invasive species to its new environment, combined with the overfishing of large fish, has weakened the health of coral reefs in the Caribbean. Panama has not been spared the influx of invasive species, which are weakening some of the world's richest ecosystems. These ecosystems are home to nearly 50% of the world's amphibian species. Frogs occupy one of the most important niches in the food chain. They consume large amounts of harmful insects and serve as food themselves for many species of reptiles, birds, and fish. In the field of medicine, they have also led to the development of antibiotics and are important in cancer research. Over the past 250 million years, they have withstood many catastrophes affecting life on Earth. But today, frogs are in trouble. A mysterious disease is attacking them where their numbers are highest. To make matters worse, these frogs are also weakened by insecticides and habitat loss. In just a few years, over 100 species have gone extinct. A few years ago, biologist Edgardo Griffith used to come to this river to study frogs.
I used to find 56 species of frogs around this stream alone. And now can't hear anything, really, you know.
The cause of this sharp decline? An invasive species. A mysterious fungus called chytrid has invaded the rivers of Panama's mountains.
The fungus arrived in 2005, killed 90% of the amphibian community, in some cases 100% of the individuals of certain species. Came, kill, stay, and at the same time it's moving eastward, but it's also coming up from South America.
Found in Mexico as early as 1972, the disease spread to Central America. Other infection sites have been found all over the world. Today, over a third of the world's 6,000 known amphibian species are threatened with extinction.
To me, I used to be a field biologist. Now I think I'm like an extinction biologist.
For scientists, time is running out. Edgardo and his colleagues are trying to capture living frogs in the hopes of learning more about the disease. They organize regular searches in Panama's rivers. Chytrid is spreading at a rate of over 30 kilometers per year. Scientists are trying to understand how it spreads from region to region. When a species nears extinction in nature, scientists often have no other choice but to remove the few survivors from the wild.
Right here. This one might be one of the species that we need to focus more into it and see why they survive, you know.
The last remaining individuals of many frog species are today conserved in sterilized containers, isolated from the outside world, where the dangerous fungus threatens their survival. Like Noah's Arks, these containers are only a fragile and temporary means to preserve the genetic heritage of dozens of amphibian species. But this is the best that scientists can do.
Some of them are not dealing with chytrid yet in their populations, but we know it's going to get there sooner or later. So we're trying to rescue as many as we can, try to breed them, try to keep them healthy. This might be the last one, so it's a huge responsibility for us.
Yeah. In the name of all the frogs dying on the jungle floor, the search continues. Long considered among the most ideal frog habitats, Panama's forests are now a real threat to their survival. Today, this unprecedented epidemic is threatening the ecological balance of ecosystems around the world. In the Cayman Islands, it's increasing human population that is harming habitats. Over half of the original environment has been destroyed.
The population of the Cayman Islands is doubling every 12 years. What that means is the footprint on the land here that's taken over by humans is doubling every 12 years.
This habitat reduction is disastrous for certain endemic species, such as the blue iguana. Found only on Grand Cayman, it is considered one of the most threatened species in the world. As the island's largest herbivore, the blue iguana eats large amounts of fruits and flowers, which helps to disperse plant seeds over large areas. This is vital for maintaining the island's delicate plant diversity.
In 2002, we did a very detailed survey, and it was the most depressing survey I've ever been involved in, because all of the places we used to see iguanas, there were none. We think realistically it was probably more like 12 left in the wild, and they weren't finding each other to breed. So the population was doomed. It was functionally extinct, as we put it, technically speaking. They were there, but there was no future.
In 2002, Frederick Burton left his job to dedicate himself to the recovery of this species. Through trial and error, he learned how to hatch baby iguanas in incubators, far from their natural predators.
When they hatch, they're tiny, they're about this long, but they grow very, very fast. And by the time they're 2 years old, they're naturally predator-proof, effectively. They get too big for the native snakes.
Oh, this is the captive facility. You have a few hundred iguanas in here.
The young iguanas are given refuge at the Grand Cayman's Royal Botanical Park. Breeding adults, responsible for the proliferation of the species, are also kept here.
They have a need for a lot of space. I mean, we found this out. Originally, when we built this facility, we thought this was all we needed. And then we discovered they needed more space. We studied them in the wild, and then we found out, whoa, an animal like this would probably have a territory of maybe an acre or something like that. We have the 2-year-olds that we're going to put out. So Jean, these are the cages where we have the 2-year-old iguanas, the ones that we're getting ready to release into the wild.
It is now time for these young iguanas to take their true place in nature. But will this new captive-born generation succeed in recolonizing Grand Cayman's weakened environment?
Next one.
Nice. So you will sleep there for tonight, right?
Yeah. They'll be hanging in the backpacks, the same backpacks we're going to take in the morning. So they'll cool down and they'll be fine, ready to go.
After years of effort, Frederick Burton convinced the government to establish 2 protected areas on the island, where he can now release his young iguanas.
So Jean, we are on the boundary now of the Collier's Wilderness Reserve. This is the protected area on our left now. It's not huge, but the island isn't big, yeah?
By protecting the reserve from the assault of development, Frederick Burton has protected more than just the iguanas, because dozens of other threatened species also live here.
We will get rid of our packs here and we'll just take the iguana in. Here we go. Here's the box. Oh yes.
Whoa.
So now he will spend all night inside this box. All night he will sleep in here, and in the morning at first light he will come out into this strange world. And the population has gone from about 12 now to about 650, 700, somewhere around there.
A human initiative saved the blue iguana from extinction. Years of effort and protection have resulted in a protected area adapted to these animals' needs. Frederick Burton now hopes that these winning conditions will allow the most threatened reptile on the planet to begin breeding in the wild again.
The perseverance of Frederick Burton is inspiring. It proves that sometimes the efforts of a few dedicated people can make up for the abuses of society.
Sometimes evolution itself can put a species at risk.
All right.
Over time, a species can become isolated on an island, like Escudo de Veraguas, off the coast of Panama. Biologist Bryson Voirin has dedicated his life to studying what some scientists believe is the rarest mammal on Earth, the pygmy three-toed sloth. These sloths live in one of the world's most productive and most useful ecosystems in terms of biodiversity, the mangrove forest.
No, that looks like mangrove. It's not. It's really shallow.
In the tropics, mangroves protect shorelines from erosion, and they provide food and shelter for many threatened species.
Oh, hey, look, it's eating. There's a sloth right there. It's a female. Yeah, she's eating a leaf. She's got it right in her mouth.
Yeah, I see it. Yeah.
Oh, she's got a baby. Let's see if we're real quiet. Maybe we won't. It's one of the rarest mammals on Earth, and there's two of them right there.
The pygmy three-toed sloth is found only on the island of Escudo de Veraguas. Discovered in 2001, it was immediately classified as critically endangered. Recent studies have indicated that this sloth lives exclusively in the mangrove, making it even more vulnerable, because worldwide, mangroves are being affected by climate change and human development. At current rates, they could disappear entirely by the end of the 21st century. Bryson Voirin is concerned about the survival of pygmy sloths, because studies show that there are only 63 of them. During his last expedition, he attached radio collars to 10 sloths. Bryson expects to find them in the mangrove because the animals move very little and use the natural camouflage of the mangrove to avoid predators.
Oh, wow. There he is, right there.
Right there, in the mangroves again.
Yeah, he's still in the mangrove, so he hasn't really gone anywhere in the past month or so.
In the days that follow, he finds 9 of the 10 pygmy sloths, all in the mangrove. But the team is worried because one is missing.
Sebastian.
Jean. Hi, Jean, Sebastian.
Hi, Sebastian. Yeah, we're just at the end of the mangroves. We lost our signal a little bit. We're gonna need some help.
Okay.
In 2005, several families of fishermen took up residence on the island. Their knowledge of the area could help find the missing sloth.
It doesn't really bother.
Hay mucho.
You think that the one that live in a mangrove, they live in a mangrove, but there is a lot more right behind in the jungle here.
So let's check in the forest for sure. Yeah, definitely. Muchas gracias.
This surprising information contradicts previous studies indicating that the mangrove is the pygmy sloth's sole habitat. Bryson decides to search in one of the channels leading into the forest.
Number 5 is the one that I just don't know where he went. But he might have actually gone out of the mangroves and into the forest, which would be pretty exciting because that means that he's actually eating other things besides mangrove leaves, and he's in the interior of the island maybe. Hopefully we can find him. All right, I got him on the 900 frequency. Hear that chirping? That's the sloth. So he must be straight back that way.
Every step away from the mangrove would appear to increase the credibility of the locals. But it is also possible that Bryson will only find the collar of a poached sloth. But if the sloth is found in the forest, it would be great news for the species. In nearby Costa Rica, Jan and Jose have yet to catch a jaguar. The scientists are concerned because the animal's distribution in the reserve is well known, and the lack of any tracks is surprising. They redouble their efforts in other sectors of the reserve. Capturing such a cunning animal is a huge challenge, but it's an essential part of the research, because only through a better understanding of the jaguar's migration patterns can its living space be increased. On Grand Cayman, Frederick Burton and his blue iguanas have benefited from their protected habitat for nearly 2 years.
Joel, there's a hatchling.
Yeah, that's great.
That's the first wild-born young iguana we have ever seen in this area. This is a wild iguana that has hatched here in the protected area.
So it is working.
It's working. It's
great.
Working. I think it's very interesting working on a small island because it is like a microcosm of what is going on everywhere in the world. And it's very important, I think, for people working in conservation to spend at least part of their time working on things that can succeed. It's important for personal motivation, but it's also important for the way that conservation is presented to the world. People get very tired of hearing bad news stories all the time.
The wild birth of a baby iguana is a triumph of nature. On Escudo de Veraguas, the radio signal leads Bryson Boyrin on his quest.
You could just see her fur. Hey, buddy. Okay. Look at that. Wow. Whew. Victoria. Hey. Whoa, you're looking big. Oh, man.
That's great.
Oh, she looks great. Look at her.
Yeah.
That's great. She looks like she's been doing very good here in the forest and not in the mangroves, so she looks very healthy. You know, one thing I think that this shows is that even though the mangroves are being cut, that may not be as big of a risk for the pygmy sloths, because if they're able to eat other things in the forest, at least they have other food sources besides just the mangroves. So I'm pretty confident to say that there are more sloths than just 63 on Escudo. There are probably a lot more. If they're in the whole island here like this, that means the population is pretty good.
Ready to go?
All right, Victoria.
Back to home, sweet home.
So the locals were right. If the pygmy sloths are spread over the entire island and live in its abundant forest, scientists will have to re-examine their numbers and maybe even the status of the species. It's fantastic news for the pygmy three-toed sloth. This important discovery was the result of collaboration between scientists and the island's inhabitants. But the happiness of this day is short-lived. Not far away, a nasty surprise awaits the scientists. A green turtle, another endangered species, is trapped in the dugout of a group of poachers.
So they're in the islands, you know, so they're probably gonna cut it up, smoke it, and then they will cook it slowly. And they'll finish with it. And this animal can stay at least a week before he starts to get weak.
Do they really know what they're doing?
I really think they really know what they do. The police would come around here maybe 1 or 2 times in a month, just pass around looking for drugs people, but they really don't looking to see if people killing sea turtle.
That's pretty sad to see.
It's pretty sad, you know, for me, it's because, you know, I worked 13 years protecting sea turtle with the Peter Maitland Animal Project in Cayos Zapatia. And my father got more than 20 years saving them, you know, trying to save them, and I do the same, you know, so it's pretty sad to see they catch it and they're going to kill it, you know.
Poaching is yet another threat in the fight to conserve endangered species. And the problem is widespread, even in protected areas.
So?
Bad news.
Nothing?
Nothing. We checked all the traps again, where we put the extra pheromones out last night, and nothing.
No tracks, nothing?
No tracks. We actually went along a couple extra trails and checked that where there were some muddy spots from the rain that we had the other day. We haven't seen a track since you've been here.
Well, that's life, I suppose.
Yep, we're obviously very concerned about what might be causing this. Even if we have all this conservation momentum behind us, it can just take a few people to come in and maybe snare some animals, which is what we're hearing. It's depressing.
But where are Cora and the other jaguars? There are rumors that poachers have recently been operating inside the reserve, and 2 of them were even bold enough to brag of their horrible acts on social networks.
Oh my God, that's sad.
It's a catastrophe for the local population, which numbers only 14 jaguars.
How far should we go to protect threatened species? A private militia patrols the reserve every day. Around here, they don't mess around when it comes to conservation. There are rampant rumors that up to 11 jaguars have been killed in the region, possibly even within the boundaries of the reserve. Jaguar skins have been found on the black market.
It makes me sad because it's as if they were threatening members of my own family. So I don't know what we're going to do with these poachers. So much work, love, and sacrifice over so many years, only to see our jaguars killed. We're going to return to the mountain and try to find these hunters who shoot at anything that moves.
On Little Cayman, another type of hunting party is being organized. Local diving associations are mobilizing to wipe out the lionfish, the species now considered the worst poacher in the Caribbean. But the divers must keep up the hunting pressure if they are going to neutralize this invasion, because lionfish reproduce extremely quickly. This is not sustainable. So they have turned to a more natural solution. They are enlisting the help of the few groupers that live near the coastline. Little by little, they are training them to hunt the invader. Who knows whether these few fish will develop a taste for the lionfish and transmit this new feeding habit to other fish. Earth's ecosystems are today weakened and threatened by a variety of external pressures. Conservation efforts are vital, but the hard work of many can be completely undone by the greed of just a few.
Buying the turtle's freedom cost only a few dollars. A modest sum given the situation. We even wondered if we were not trying to appease our own conscience in the face of so much indifference. But this was a living symbol of nature's difficult coexistence with humanity. We just couldn't leave it there and do nothing.
I'm optimistic because I believe we can change things, and if a human being realizes the importance, there's still something we can do, but we are right on the edge.
The coral reef system could be in dire straits, but we need to take efforts in order to mitigate these, and we can stop fishing larger fish and keep them on the reef, and it's important that we do it now.
I'm not really sure which species will survive and which will survive in the future, but I think life will find a way.
The lionfish invasion really highlights for me is the importance for humans to understand that they can have a drastic effect, and they need to realize what they're doing before they do it.
When you're in a forest with predators, it gives you a new respect for life. It gives you a new respect for the connectivity of all things. You actually feel like you're not on the top of the world. Maybe that's where we should begin, is to not just educate people in the classroom, but take people out of the classroom into what's left of the wilderness so that we can actually save it.
once you inspire people and educate them, I think then they'll start to care more about it and help protect it.
The troubled coexistence between humans and the different forms of life on our planet too often translates into the loss of species that play key roles in ecosystems. Perhaps we can draw inspiration from the remarkable work of scientists who dedicate their lives to preserving endangered species. Humanity has a duty to reestablish a harmonious relationship with nature, and do it soon. It is within our grasp to sustainably and harmoniously develop the Earth's resources. But time is running out if our legacy to future generations is to inspire a wave of change and a new attitude, one of respect for biodiversity and the essential harmony among all forms of life. The extraordinary diversity of life on Earth reveals itself in a stunning variety of shapes and colors that paint a unique picture of our planet. Over the eons, plants and animals have evolved to interact with each other in an exquisite balance to form the great tree of life. Our own survival depends on these different forms of life, from the tiniest to the very largest. Biodiversity provides natural services that allow different forms of life to breathe, eat, and reproduce. It regulates the planet's climate and purifies its soil and water. This extraordinary diversity of species, which interact in equilibrium in Earth's various ecosystems, is the very foundation of everything in our world. But unchecked exploitation of the Earth's resources is now threatening this balance.
Biodiversity is not just this abstract concept in halls of science. It's the living underpinning of our lives. And I think in 100 or 200 years, when lots of our geopolitical melodramas have been forgotten, I actually think the world is going to judge this moment that we're in now very much on how we grappled with this issue. So it's exciting to be a part of it at the same time.
The first forms of life arose in the oceans about 3.8 billion years ago. Through natural selection, the driver of evolution, a multitude of species came into existence, forming the basis of the diversity of life as we know it today. But this biodiversity is now threatened. If nothing is done to correct the situation, between 1/3 and 1/2 of all living species could disappear by the end of the century. The oceans are the largest ecosystem on Earth, but our exploitation of their resources is far beyond their ability to regenerate.
The fishing techniques we use today are like warfare, a war we are waging against fish.
It is estimated that 87% of the Earth's oceans are overexploited or exploited to their limits by the fishing industry.
The way fisheries are controlled out here in the open sea, it's no man's land. It's everyone take all. Everything is for free.
The spectacular growth of industrialized fishing has caused an alarming decline in fish stocks, a decline that threatens the very survival of the fishing industry.
If we would be to take all the subsidies to the fishing fleets, most of those fleets would stop the day after.
In recent decades, stocks of large fish in the world's oceans have plummeted by 90%. These large predators are essential to the balance of marine ecosystems.
All the data says we have a big, serious crisis. But what I like to say is that extinction is only inevitable if you watch it on TV.
For several years, the oceanographic schooner Sedna IV has crisscrossed the Earth's oceans. Mission leader, Jean Lemire.
We have embarked on a 3-year trip around the world to assess the state of biodiversity. Our mission, 1,000 Days for the Planet, will allow us to meet with scientists who dedicate their lives to the comprehension of what is critically at stake regarding our environment.
The Sedna heads to Costa Rica in Central America, where the economy depends in large part on the extraordinary biodiversity of its national parks. Every year, tourists from around the world come here to get in touch with nature. The magnificent beach of Playa Grande in the Guanacaste region receives its share of tourists. But come nightfall, they give way to biologists and volunteers. Tonight, like every winter night, the beach belongs to one of the ocean's oldest creatures, the leatherback turtle. At high tide, this female has come to lay her eggs, as her ancestors have done for nearly 100 million years.
We spent 20 years, the best years of our lives, saving these turtles, right?
Biologists James Spotilla and Frank Palladino founded the Leatherback Trust, an organization dedicated to saving Pacific leatherback turtles.
We've been protecting every nest on the beach, protecting all the turtles, producing lots of hatchlings. They take 15, 20 years to mature. We've been doing this 20 years, so we're starting to see new turtles coming.
It is estimated that 60% of leatherback turtles have disappeared in the past 30 years.
She looks to be about 145 centimeters long, probably around 18 to 20 years of age, and she's finished nesting. She's now in the process of early bearing, but you can see how delicately she's using her hands to pat the sand down and to pack it so that the eggs are in a nice location, and then she will start to camouflage and cover all around here. And in 60 days, hopefully at this point, some turtles will dig their way up and out and head out back out to the ocean. in 1980, there was over 100,000 females nesting in the Pacific alone. Now we estimate there's only about 1,500 to 3,000, and that's since 1980. And the only thing that has changed is the impact that humans have had on them. We take away the beaches because we develop them to have our recreation and hotels and so on, so they can't reproduce on their natal beaches anymore. We changed our fishing practices in the 80s. Now we have long lines, which by accidental bycatch will kill turtles, and the estimates are that about 20,000 turtles a year. And the third thing we did was we harvested their eggs.
According to popular belief, these eggs have aphrodisiac properties, creating a black market that thrives even today.
In California, especially along the Pacific, they have swarms of jellyfish. And they say, we never had swarms of jellyfish before. And I tell them, you've taken the major predators of jellyfish out of the ocean. Where there used to be 100,000, now there's only 1,500. And each of those turtles would eat an estimate of 90 kilograms of jellyfish a day. And not only do those jellyfish have an impact that we have to close the beach because you're going to get stung, but they eat the little fish in the ocean that grow up into the big fish that we like to catch and eat. So the more jellyfish you have, the more problems there is also. So when you say, are leatherbacks important to save? I say, well, there's a good example for you. Right here on the tag, it tells you what time she came up, when she started digging, when she's covering. She did lay 49 eggs. We know what season that she has come in. There is a cohort of 4 or 5 females that have nested here for 4 different seasons, and it's almost 20 years apart from the first time we've seen them to this time. So we know an awful lot about the demographics of these turtles.
Of the 7 turtle species living in our oceans, 6 are on the red list of threatened or vulnerable species. But turtles are not the only members of this unenviable list. Another emblem of our oceans has a troubled coexistence with humans: the shark. Sharks have existed in our oceans for over 400 million years. Yet today, about 1/3 of the world's species of sharks and rays are threatened with extinction, primarily because of overfishing. Large ocean predators, which play an essential role in maintaining balance in our ecosystems, are on the losing side of decades of exploitation.
There are recent scientific publications that say that, in general, all marine predators have declined 90% in the last 50 years. So, you know, it's not looking good.
Biologist Randall Arauz is internationally recognized for his efforts to protect Costa Rica's turtle and shark populations. As an activist, he uses every means at his disposal to raise awareness of the catastrophic decline of turtles and sharks around the world. Through protests, school programs, and negotiating with fishermen, Randall tries to educate the public about the importance of large predators in ecosystems. And he wages an unrelenting war against long-line fishers who indiscriminately target large fish species.
A friend of mine was lucky enough and he was able to get a job on one of these longline boats as a cook. So when he got the job, he told me. So we put that camera on the boat with my friend, and he was acting like it was a family video. And sure enough, he brought video of leatherback sea turtles on the long lines, sea lions on the long lines, molas, all sorts of wildlife. So this is the first time we're getting a glimpse of what is occurring with the longline fishery, the bycatch problem that it constitutes. And at the very end of the video, they pull up a shark. They hack off the fin and they throw the shark back into the water. And I was just stunned. Like, what was that? What just happened?
What Randall had just witnessed for the first time was the cruel practice of shark finning. In its most barbaric form, the shark is dragged onto the boat, where the fishers hack off its fins and tail. They then throw the shark back to sea, often still alive. Unable to swim, it dies a slow death by suffocation. These images sparked an outcry against this practice.
First of all, it's cruel. It's a cruel, painful death for these magnificent animals. From a more technical point of view, it's unsustainable. They're wiping out marine biodiversity so that a culture on the other side of the world can have their shark fin soup.
Shark fins represent only about 5% of the animal's body mass, but they can fetch up to $400 per kilogram, making them one of the most valuable marine products in the world. It is estimated that between 40 and 70 million sharks are killed every year for this controversial market. The Sedna stops on the island of Fayal in the middle of the Atlantic. Sitting astride the mid-Atlantic ridge, the Azores archipelago is the result of 20 million years of volcanic activity. These spectacular islands, which emerged from the ocean only 5 million years ago, are still changing under the effects of volcanism and shifts in the 3 major tectonic plates that meet here. Deep in the ocean, seamounts rise toward the surface, causing an upwelling of ocean currents. This, in turn, sustains an abundance of marine life. The exceptional richness of these waters attracts many different species.
The most important fishing grounds in the whole of the Azores. And you have these 2 major...
Pedro Afonso, a biologist at the University of the Azores, works with a team of scientists to better understand the role of large predators in ecosystems.
Which means that it's probably the time...
A shark specialist, he has earned the trust of local fishers. Thanks to the long-standing relationships Afonso has developed, the Sedna's mission leader, Jean Lemire, is allowed to experience life aboard a long liner. These fishing boats are frequently portrayed as the source of all evil.
Our old ideas of the sea and products of the sea are a thing of the past. The fishing techniques we use today are like warfare, a war we are waging against fish.
This long liner alone will cast nearly 100 kilometers of line, containing thousands of baited hooks. The line is reeled in every 12 hours over the next 3 weeks. This represents over 40 periods of intensive fishing, regardless of conditions. Although this fishing technique is not highly selective, the fishers are primarily seeking swordfish, a large predator that fetches good prices. Fishing boats have operated in these rich waters for years. But despite the use of ever more effective fishing techniques, catches are declining. Today, far fewer swordfish and other large fish are caught in the waters off the Azores. And it's the same around the world. Yet fishing pressure today is greater than ever. The largest fish are preserved on ice to supply the insatiable market for fresh fish. Since a fishing trip lasts at least 3 weeks, the fish sold in supermarkets have often been caught a month earlier. Current regulations specify a minimum catch size for swordfish. Legally, smaller fish must be thrown back. But in general, these young swordfish are cleaned and frozen to be sold later. This practice is illegal. Biologist Gonzalo Grassa often serves as a scientific observer on fishing boats.
How can we avoid that situation where, you know, they are catching fish that are too small? That's probably difficult, right?
Yeah. Well, one of the ways can be increase the size of the hook, and there are several kinds of hooks. There are some twisted, and well, but when they use another kind of hook, they don't catch so many fish, and they prefer to catch a little bit more fish, but smaller than no fish.
Fishermen dispute this regulation on fish size. They contend that since most of the young swordfish are already dead when they haul them aboard, they don't see why they should be forced to throw them back. With no one enforcing the regulation, young swordfish continue to be caught.
Long-lining is fishing at an industrial scale. It's a perfect example of everything that's wrong with fishing. It's a world unto itself, where companies do practically whatever they like. It's like a city without a police force that's controlled by gangs and mobsters. It's incredible.
The major decline in swordfish stocks has given rise to a new market: shark fishing. Long viewed merely as accidental catches, what fishermen call bycatch, sharks were thrown back because of their low market value. But the expansion of the lucrative shark fin market has changed all that.
The fishery, at least in the Atlantic, shifted from a swordfish fishery to a blue shark and swordfish fishery. And actually nowadays, the European fleet depends on the blue shark to make a living.
The commercial fishing industry now relies heavily on the significant revenue earned from shark fins. Sharks are no longer considered bycatch, and fishers are directly targeting the blue shark, an abundant species in oceans all over the world, to compensate for lower revenues from declining fish stocks. Unlike swordfish, most sharks are still very much alive when they are hauled aboard. But the size of the animal does not appear to be a factor for sharks. Even the young ones end up in the ship's hold.
The way fisheries are controlled out here in the open sea, it's no man's land. It's everyone take all. Everything is for free. And that isn't changing yet. And I think that is something that many countries have to work on. The United States, the Economic Union, Australia, which is a big fishing nation. And, you know, we need to get together and change the way fishery policy is established.
From a regulatory standpoint, there is a huge difference between the kind of shark fishing done on this longliner and finning, the practice of removing only the shark's fins before throwing the animal back to sea. Horrific images of finning have been shown around the world, and public opinion has turned against this cruel practice. More and more countries now ban shark finning.
Our campaigns have had major impact in Costa Rica. For instance, we were able to create laws against shark finning. There's a real famous law now that you can only allow sharks to be brought to port if they have the fin attached to the body. And this law is known as the Costa Rican anti-shark finning law. And right now we have 6 countries following this law: Ecuador, Colombia, El Salvador, the United States. And right now in the Economic Union, there are discussions to also impose this law. You must bring the shark with the fin attached. And shark finners say, oh, you can't do that, because if the shark is frozen, you can't take the fin off. And we have proven in Costa Rica that it is all a lie. You can bring sharks frozen to port, you can remove the fin, it can be done. Whoever says it can't be done is because they're shark finning and it's very uncomfortable for them to do it any other way. When we started these campaigns, 400 foreign longline boats from Taiwan would land their products in Costa Rica every year. Now we're down to 70 or 80. Unfortunately, I don't think we can really call it a victory until we push them out of Central America and hopefully out of the eastern tropical Pacific.
Faced with increasing public pressure, shark fishers must now keep the entire body of the shark, which is frozen and sold. This major change to the regulations means that most of the fish is now utilized. In practical terms, this kind of shark fishing is completely legal.
Before, the meat of blue shark was considered to be useless. Now we have a market to carry this meat, this protein, and distribute it as a wide variety of products, of fish byproducts, from fish sticks to fish meal.
Blue shark carcasses and their precious fins are now propping up an industry that can no longer support itself because of its own past abuses. But what are the long-term consequences of intensive fishing on blue shark populations?
The international agencies say that stocks vary between very overexploited in the Mediterranean Sea, for example, to intensively exploited in the Atlantic Ocean. So it's not the most threatened shark population in the globe, for sure, but there are concerns as to the point at which it can withstand the current levels of exploitation.
The expansion of industrial fishing is like a red stain spreading over the world. It starts in Western Europe, and Russia plays an important role, as does North America. It then spreads to the African coasts, and then to the South Atlantic and South Pacific. It spreads like a skin disease. And this wave, this red tide, gets to the Antarctic, and it stops, because it can't go any further. There's no future in fishing. Too many restrictions, and the finger is always pointed at us. No matter what we do, it's always our fault. So I don't see much of a future in it, especially shark fishing. No more sharks, no more fishing. All that's left is to break the ships apart and burn them.
The fishing fleets have grown in the past decades dependent on subsidies from governments. That is, the real cost involved in sending a fishing vessel out there with all the costs in fuel, in gear, in paying the crewmen, etc., is just not overturned by the real profit that the catch is going to make in the market. And the only reason why that fleet or that particular vessel is doing its everyday fishing is because it gets subsidies from all of us taxpayers to lower the cost of those items.
The destruction of marine ecosystems is being financed in part by government subsidies, amounting to anywhere from $20 to $30 billion a year. Yet it is completely conceivable that this money could be used to remove boats from the fishing fleet and retrain the fishermen. This would result in a smaller fishery that is sustainable and profitable.
If we would be to take all the subsidies to the fishing fleets all over the world, and in particular In developed countries, most of those fleets would stop the day after.
If the fishing industry is committing suicide, we must prevent that. But then we should declare it incompetent, if you will. If a system is not working, we should take charge of it, not let it spontaneously self-destruct. In the Mediterranean, fishing is banned for 2 months, and fishermen are compensated. Why don't Portugal and Spain do like Italy? Why not stop for 2 months in the summer? The fishing authorities know very well what goes on in the Mediterranean. We could protect our species like they do. And they don't even have quotas. But they make us throw fish under 25 kilos back to sea. Italy's part of Europe, isn't it? If the fish is alive, we remove the hook and return it to the water. If it's caught by the belly, we use it for bait. But if it's dead, what can we do? Bring it back to life? Of course not. So we keep it. It means more income, even if we're not allowed to keep it. We tell them that it was already dead, but they don't care. They say it's illegal, that they can't tell for sure if it was dead or not. And they fine us anyway.
The businessmen are in charge of establishing the policy. And of course, their policy is always considering their own pockets. What we need is fisheries directed with the public interest, with science in mind. How many boats can fish this resource? When should we stop fishing? Where should we not fish? Then even if it hurts somebody's pocket, we must stop fishing.
How am I supposed to make a living? Offer me a good job and I'll stop. Offer me a job that lets me come home at night, and I'll take it.
The time spent on board with these fishermen was a troubling experience. It is difficult not to question the morality of this new market for shark flesh. At the current market price, fishermen only get less than $1 a kilo, a tiny fraction of the price obtained for shark fins. At this price, is it a real and profitable market, or is it a way to skirt around the new laws adopted by numerous countries to forbid finning?
The good relation between fishermen and scientists is crucial to solve this big challenge we have in minds. First of all, we already talked about how important it is to get this crucial data. But there's no way you're going to get this crucial data without the collaboration between, the active collaboration between these two agents, because many times it's the fishermen that allow you to have access to those data. So that is absolutely crucial to start with. Secondly, the fishermen themselves have a lot of knowledge that very often is on the base of the scientific knowledge itself. So you will never get that knowledge if there's no trust between those two actors. So that needs to be part of the deal.
Our oceans have been patient. They have been patient with us. But now, the demand is becoming increasingly unrealistic. It's not hard to imagine a day when fishing will be mostly artisanal. There will be fewer fishermen because they won't be needed. Fish will be a luxury item, something you pay a premium for to eat on special occasions, like a Christmas turkey.
The decline of fish stocks in our oceans has already begun. And if nothing is done to correct the situation quickly, this decline could reach alarming proportions. Globally, nearly 1 billion people depend on fish as their primary source of protein. So we must rethink our relationship with the seafood products we consume. Shark research is a relatively new field, and scientists will have to intensify their efforts to better understand the ecology of large predators if they are to propose effective conservation measures. Pedro Afonso and his team are trying to unravel the mysteries of the migration routes used by the blue shark.
We know where are the juvenile grounds. There's also some good evidence about where preferred mating grounds are located, but it is the pupping grounds that are still very elusive to science. We suspect that the Azores can be an area of increased pupping opportunities, only in a particular time of the year, which happens to be right now.
The Sedna, a former fishing vessel herself, will be the scientific vessel for this occasion. The goal of this mission, to capture a gestating female blue shark.
There is an era of research on marine ecology and behavior before the advent of electronic tagging and another one after the advent of electronic tagging. The capacity of these devices to open windows into the life of these animals and into the significance of particular habitats is just too precious for us to leave it behind.
Using satellite transmitters, scientists are able to gather an impressive amount of essential data, such as time and depth of dives, information about the physical environment, and, of course, detailed records of an animal's movement patterns. Lady Luck smiles upon the scientists. They have just captured a female blue shark, but they must act quickly.
Vertebrates in general have this thing called the tonic immobility reflex, which basically is when you're turned upside down, you become numb. And they get really amenable to work with. And we think that they also get a decreased pain function. We do that to promote natural anesthesia.
The satellite beacon is attached to the shark's dorsal fin. Every time the animal surfaces, the emitter will send the data stored in its internal memory to the satellite.
Of course, there's some injury inflicted into the animal, but it's minimal injury compared to the types of injury that blue sharks take during their lives.
Despite the size of this female, the scientists can't be certain that it is currently gestated. Sharks are viviparous, meaning that the embryos develop inside the female.
Look!
Oh yeah.
Look!
Oh yeah.
Baby shark, right here. Look at this. You asked for pregnant female. That's.
We need to be fast now.
Okay.
We want to be fast. We want to be fast.
Here.
Oh yeah, again. Females have this reflex. When they're close to be ready to deliver, if they're in life-threatening situations like this, they will try to get the babies out, even if it's a bit early, because they will survive, whereas she might not. So, well, that's a defense. She needs some water flowing.
Okay.
Okay. Stop. It's the kind of experience that provokes these contradictory feelings, right? On one hand, you're witnessing a rare event that actually tells you some very important information for the conservation of the species you're working with. On the other hand, we were a bit stressed as well because we didn't want to put stress in mom and on the little pups. The pups were not fully sized, which is about 40 centimeters. I would say those pups would be around 35 centimeters. But as we saw, the pups took probably, 3 to 4 seconds after an initial moment of confusion to swim away in a very steady way.
Way! Woo-hoo! All right! All right! Okay. Right.
The temporary captivity required to install the satellite tag will not harm this female, which now regains its freedom.
Woo! All right!
The data collected by the transmitter will give scientists a better understanding of the shark's migration routes and help to better protect the species on fishing grounds, especially during this critical period of reproduction. Over the course of hundreds of millions of years, sharks have lived through every major extinction event the Earth has experienced. Yet, in only a few decades' time, humanity has jeopardized the survival of the ocean's greatest predator. And it is not alone.
You have an opportunity to see a dinosaur come out of the ocean and do all these very intricate behaviors. And I don't think there's anybody who ever walks away from this beach after seeing this experience that hasn't been awed. This is probably one of the magnificent sights that you'll see in nature. As adults, they don't have a predator, so they're very long-lived, but now they weren't living long enough to replace themselves. What I mean by that is, each turtle comes up and let's say in a really good year they lay 10 nests of 65 eggs. That means they have laid 650 eggs. You would think that's a lot, but only about half of those eggs hatch. So that means there's 325 hatchlings. And now our data over the 20 years is showing that for 1,000 hatchlings that come up out of the ground, only one returns about 15 years later to start laying eggs. That means they have a 1 in 1,000 chance. So those 325 turtles that hatched in one season, that's not even replacing her. So she has to come back 3 years later, lay again. That's another 325. It still has not replaced. Has to come back in another 3 years, 9 years, or maybe 10, 11 total, because it's 3 to 4 years that they return. You finally have replaced the female, but you haven't replaced the male. So it takes a long time for these turtles to replace themselves.
This leatherback turtle now returns to the sea, leaving her precious eggs behind, thus perpetuating the natural cycle hundreds of millions of years old.
We have a national park with having a foundation raising donations, trained the local people, educated them, everything's great, and now climate change comes, just what we need. The problem for these turtles in climate change is that they don't have sex chromosomes, and the sex of the turtle depends upon the temperature of incubation. So at 29.5 degrees in a nest, you get about 50-50 male and female. 29, you get all male turtles. Above 30 degrees, you get all female turtles. And when you get up towards 34 degrees, they all start dying. It gets too hot. So the beach here is generally, by December, on a dry year, is running 30, 31 degrees. So we're producing females. And the projections are for climate change. As the Earth warms from global warming, this area of Costa Rica will get warmer and drier. Many areas get wetter, but this gets warmer and drier. Therefore, this beach will get hotter. And we will have to do some management, or we will, one, produce all female turtles, or second, they will all die.
Conservation measures alone are no longer enough to save the Pacific leatherback turtle. Soon, It will be necessary to artificially control the egg's incubation temperature to ensure the survival of the species. The tragic fate of the leatherback turtle is a prime example of the uneasy coexistence between humanity and the other forms of life on this planet.
We talk about sharks are going extinct, turtles are going extinct, how important they are for the ecosystem, you know, and we go to meetings and we go to conventions. So all this talk and talk and talk, but no action. Scientists are saying we have another 40 or 50 years before it's all depleted. In our lifetime, we may see this big dramatic change, and let's hope we can stop it. We need everybody's help.
I am a near-term pessimist and a long-term optimist. Now, in reality, all the data says we have a big, serious crisis. But what I like to say is that extinction is only inevitable if you watch it on TV.
We need a more sustainable management of global fishing in the world. And that might take the exploitation of lower trophic chain resources, which can still give good protein to people and release a little bit our pressure on the top levels. So balanced harvesting is becoming a major hope in the fisheries science arena.
The people working on climate change, they understand. If we add acidification to the equation, it's the apocalypse. Everybody loses, and in 100 years, there are no fisheries anywhere. It's unthinkable, because if we can't solve this problem at the beginning of the century, there won't be a fishery at the end of the century.
We are the passive witnesses to our own decline, but we are also the species that hold the solutions to the problems of our environment. The sustainable development of the Earth resources is possible, and it is perhaps our only hope.
The conservation challenges are considerable, but it's not too late to act. Of all species, humans have benefited most from the natural laws of evolution, and we must show restraint and control in exploiting the Earth's resources. Is it not time for us to take another look at our relationship with nature if we are to preserve the extraordinary biodiversity that supports life? The extraordinary diversity of life on Earth is the result of a fragile balance that dictates the fundamental laws of life and allows different forms of life to interact, grow, and reproduce. The culmination of eons of evolution, life expresses itself in a colorful canvas that gives the Earth its unique character. Our own survival depends on this biodiversity, from the tiniest life forms to the very largest. The first forms of life arose in the oceans about 3.8 billion years ago. Today, they still support an array of fragile ecosystems that continue to astonish us as we learn more about them. But our planet's biodiversity is threatened. Today, plant and animal species are disappearing at an accelerated rate, probably unequaled in Earth's history. We must regain a balance between all species if we want to preserve the ecosystem services that nature provides. These services are what allow our own species to exist. Oceans cover over 70% of the Earth's surface. They represent 300 times more inhabitable volume than all of Earth's land habitats. It is estimated that more than 2 million species live in the oceans, about a quarter of all living species. Over 90% have yet to be documented by science. For scientists, unraveling the ocean's mysteries is a formidable challenge. Jean Lemire, mission leader of the oceanographic schooner Sedna IV.
Our mission, 1,000 Days for the Planet, is in the spirit of the great explorers of yesteryears. With scientists, we are traveling the world's ocean to better understand the conservation challenges that we all face. And there are many, many challenges, because the ocean still bears the scars of our past abuses.
The history of our exploitation of the oceans is not a glorious one. In order to supply European lanterns with oil, the great whales were hunted to the brink of extinction. We are still living with the consequences of this carnage today. Many species are still on the endangered list. Fin whales, blue whales, minke whales, right whales, and dozens of other species are struggling to recover from our bloody past. Despite the fragile moratorium that now protects most species, some countries still hunt whales in the name of science or of culture.
That is ridiculous because we don't need to take the whales for science, in quotes, especially if you use the subproduct of that science to sell it in the market.
Scientific whaling, overexploitation of ocean resources, illegal fishing. The pressure we place on the oceans has become unsustainable, and these already considerable conservation challenges have been complicated by even more insidious problems, such as plastic pollution.
The gyre, where a lot of it concentrates, some people say it's the size of Texas or even twice the size of Texas, so we're talking incredible amounts of items out there and debris.
The oceans have always supported life, but if that life is today being threatened, is it not time to rethink our relationship with the ocean's inhabitants? Of all the great oceanic migrants, whales are without question one of the most emblematic symbols of conservation. The Sedna has stopped in the Azores. The rich Atlantic waters here attract 24 species of cetacean. Though they have a long history of whale hunting, the Azorians gave up this tradition in the late 1980s. Richard Sears has studied whales for over 30 years. Every spring, the great diversity of species off the Azores lures him here to study the migratory patterns of large Atlantic whales. But it's not an easy task. Following these great migrating nomads of the oceans is a challenge for scientists.
OK, donc, on se met une heure de départ à 13h, 13h30, heure locale.
Richard travels the world to photograph different species. He introduced me to the fascinating world of whales. We often work together, and I have traveled with him to different oceans, always with the same passion, the same desire to learn more about them.
Scientists are a bit like the hunters of yesterday. In modern science, the camera has replaced the harpoon. The quest is the same, but the goal has changed. Today, we have a real desire to protect whales. These species are slowly recovering from the excessive commercial whaling that forever changed the face of our oceans. Among the victims of commercial whale hunting, the right whale. A symbol of our past abuses, the right whale is a coastal species, slow and easy to approach, and was a preferred target of the harpoon. In less than 70 years in the 19th century, North American whalers killed over 190,000 right whales in the North Atlantic. Hunting right whales was banned in 1935, but the damage was done. At that time, the population was estimated at fewer than 100 individuals in the entire North Atlantic. Today, after over 3/4 of a century of protection, only about 350 representatives of this severely threatened species remain. As hunting techniques improved, whalers were able to go after fast-swimming, ocean-going species like the blue whale, the largest animal on the planet. Up to 30 meters in length, and over 100 tons of power and grace. Before commercial hunting, the worldwide population of blue whales was estimated at over 350,000 individuals. Over the past century, nearly 99% of this population was slaughtered. Richard Sears is an expert on blue whales. He has developed a photo ID technique so that scientists can now identify and monitor the movements of this species, which is still threatened with extinction.
The pigmentation pattern on the sides of blue whales allows us to reliably identify individuals. We have identified about 325 blue whales in the North Atlantic, including many photos taken in the Azores. We have many partners here who take good pictures that allow us to match photos from year to year. In this case, Johanna, who works here in Horta, photographed this whale in 2002, and the animal returned in 2010. That's a long time between matches. I think it's the longest match we've had here in the Azores.
For over 30 years, Richard Sears has compiled photographs of blue whales. His catalog includes several hundred individuals in the North Atlantic, but their migration routes remain completely shrouded in mystery. The humpback whale was also hunted all over the world. It is estimated that in the mid-19th century, the worldwide population of humpbacks was over 125,000 individuals. In less than 100 years, nearly 95% of the population was wiped out by whalers. By the mid-1960s, only a few thousand survivors remained. In the 1980s, a broad scientific effort led to a series of techniques that today form the basis of our knowledge about this species. Among these techniques is the identification of individuals using photographs of the tail flukes.
Here's an example of photo identification of a humpback whale. It's the equivalent of a fingerprint for this species. They are kind enough to raise their fluke when they dive, and the pattern on the underside of the tail is different for each individual. It can vary from totally black to totally white. Studying individuals helps us learn about the species, and now we have extensive catalogs of humpbacks all over the planet. All this data makes it a powerful system because it allows us to learn about the movements of these animals, their migrations, their numbers, and newcomers to the population.
This technique led to the discovery of gathering sites for the species in the North Atlantic. These feeding areas are frequented by different humpback whale populations from spring to fall. Scientific research has shown that populations are faithful to these gathering sites. A humpback whale that frequents coastal waters in a particular area will generally return to the same place the following season. Every winter, most North Atlantic humpbacks migrate south to Silverbank off the coast of the Dominican Republic. They gather on this protected shallow area to mate and give birth. But scientists only discovered the importance of silverbank in the 1980s.
84, it was my first time I saw a whale. We didn't know even where was located silverbank. We heard about it, but we didn't know. The density of silverbank, if it's not the highest, it could be one of the highest of the world.
Nowadays, everything we know about the animal's movements between here and the north seems obvious. But back then, we knew very little, almost nothing. We knew they came here, but it had never been studied in depth. So we came, and we made a great many photo IDs. Each of us recognized animals from the different areas we were working in.
Over 30 years after the discovery of silverbank, scientists are back. They are now trying to determine the migration routes used by humpback whales between silverbank and their different feeding areas. For biologist Amy Kennedy, this is a chance to deploy satellite transmitters.
Smallish guy, that one.
It's the end of the season, so there are lots of males in large groups who are very active. There's a struggle between the escort and what we call the challengers. The escort is the male closest to the female, and all the other males fight to be as close to the female as possible.
Before installing the satellite beacons, the scientists try to identify the sex of the animals. They use a crossbow that shoots an arrow with a hollow tip to take a sample of the animal's skin and blubber. Using genetic profiles, scientists can determine the kinship among the different individuals.
So we have developed also a large database of whale tissue. Besides the samples that were taken for DNA studies, we also developed the archive. So it's a genetical catalog. We have whales identified genetically, and this, together with their photo IDs, they complete the information. And if anybody wants to study the population, we have another let's say, another piece of the sample, which is the archive. They are intact as they were taken, and they are frozen, keeping their qualities. So if anybody needs to do any further study, like molecular study, biomolecular study, so they just need to go to the archive and take a piece and interpret it.
To deploy the satellite transmitter, the scientist's boat must slip into a group of males, competing for the favors of a female. It's a delicate maneuver.
I need to be as close as possible, and when I shoot the tag, it's not a matter of just hitting the whale. I could shoot from a long distance and just hit the whale. It has to be in a really very specific spot where the tag goes. So I'm trying to tag very high on the animal. I'm trying to tag just below the dorsal fin and just below the hump. And that's because the tissue there is very dense. So I can track the whale underwater. I see what the animal's doing. I indicate to Oswaldo to speed up, slow down. I can see the whale. You can tell when it's coming up. I get ready. But when I know the whale's gonna come up, and preferably when it arches, I'm focused on a perpendicular shot directly in one little spot, and I really, in my head, I see almost nothing else. Oh, that's perfect. It's good, I'm really happy.
The transmitter is attached to the animal's back using a modified line thrower, which shoots the transmitter's anchoring hooks into the whale's flesh without causing too much injury.
Position very high and in very dense tissue, so it will stay in a long time, and it will transmit every surfacing. 11.
That's the tag.
Coming up. Oh, that's perfect. It's good, I'm really happy. I'm happy with today. The tags that we got on were in good positions, and I'm relieved, and I can't wait to start tracking them. I don't get to the computer now and see where they go. So this is the 4 whales that we tagged on the 2nd. So this is 4 full days of track for all 4 whales, which is really exciting because the cool thing is that all 4 of these whales were tagged in the same exact group. They were all there together, and then you can see that each one of them has gone a completely different direction. One whale has stayed almost exactly around the same spot that we tagged it. One whale has moved over to Mouchoir Bank, and one whale looks like it's starting its migration up north. And then another whale looks like it's moving to the southeast, which is really unique. And we hope that these keep lasting, because we'll be able to check them every day from here on out. And I check them a lot, so constantly checking my tags and making sure they're all working and see where everybody's going. And
you know, it's very important, this preliminary information, because we have seen that in just 5 days after the tag, the whales are outside of the boundaries of the sanctuary. So for our country, this information is very important in terms of maybe developing new policies for conservation, maybe expanding the boundaries of the sanctuary. You see how important it is for the sanctuary to be included in these areas.
So can we sort of amuse ourselves with the thought of where these guys might be going? And I would say that the Mouchwa Bank guy has a good chance of going to the Gulf of Maine.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a very good guess. I think these other whales, if they move offshore and then start heading north, they have a straight shot to somewhere else. So.
Iceland or maybe even Norway?
Yeah, yeah. There are very distinct feeding grounds in the North Atlantic, and they're characterized by high site fidelity, which means that if you go to the Gulf of Maine, you are likely to see whales that you've been seeing for generations. And it's the same with all of the major feeding grounds, Norway, Iceland, Newfoundland, Greenland. And it's all driven by the mother. So the mother will bring her calf there on its first migration. The calf remembers that migratory route and will continue to return there throughout its lifespan. Researchers in all of the feeding grounds have several generations of whales. I mean, we'll see a calf and we'll know its mother and its grandmother and its great-grandmother and its great-great-grandmother, which is awesome, just really, really great. It really shows that these whales are multinational world travelers. They are not Dominican whales, and they're not American whales or Canadian whales. They are whales of the entire North Atlantic. They cross so many different borders across so many different countries. And so we need to all work together to help preserve this species.
While some of the transmitters operated for a limited amount of time, whale number 87765 broke all records by transmitting for 57 consecutive days. The migration data of whale 87765 stopped off the coast of Newfoundland. Where will it go next? Will it remain around Newfoundland, or will it continue its migration towards Iceland, Greenland, or even Norway? The migration data confirms that humpback whales, which do not eat for the entire 4 months of their breeding period, begin to feed again as soon as they arrive in the rich waters of the north. A humpback whale requires 2 tons of food per day. But can the current state of the oceans support any eventual population increase of these species? The composition of the oceans is undergoing a transformation. Their biomass has declined sharply since the start of human exploitation. For whales, seabirds, turtles, sharks, and all migratory species that rely on the oceans, the future is more uncertain than ever.
The food that marine populations need to survive is in decline. Scientists are worried about the growing number of dead zones in the oceans. Off the coast of Bermuda, we met with scientists from the Corvette Kramer, a research vessel studying the composition of the oceans. They recently discovered a new continent of plastic in the Atlantic Ocean.
Sea Education Association essentially is an educational organization that teaches students about the ocean. We do a lot of basic measurements, and the value of those relatively simple measurements is that we go year after year more or less to the same places. So for instance, our plastic research, where we're doing relatively simple things, each student project is relatively simple, but they build on each other over time.
So what they're going to do now is set up the new straw net, and this is our old standby net. We've been doing it the same way for 30 years. And realistically, it may not be the most efficient way to do it, but we don't want to change what we're doing because we have a long-term database, and so we want to keep doing it the same way every time.
A few years ago, the discovery of a substantial accumulation of plastic in the Pacific Ocean came as a bombshell all over the world. No one suspected the same thing in the Atlantic, where the Sea Education Association has been gathering data for 20 years. But in fact, concentrations of plastic in the Atlantic equal or surpass those observed in the Pacific. And this invisible patch extends into the feeding areas of the ocean's great migrators.
The plastic comes from land. We think that probably around 80% of it is actually shore-based. So it's from you and me. We're trying to do our best. We're trying to recycle, but you know, it's a windy day. The piece of plastic, the yogurt container blows out of the recycle bin, gets in the water system in the river, ends up in the ocean.
I just wanted to show you some of the kinds of things that we find. This piece is broken, and you can see it's starting to get brittle. It's being weathered by the sun, by just wave action, getting quite brittle into small pieces, easy to break.
And we're seeing numbers as high as 250,000 pieces per square kilometer, or even higher. Now granted, most of those pieces are tiny, millimeter-sized pieces, but still, it's a big ocean. When you extrapolate that to the size of the ocean and the patches, it's a lot of plastic.
Our plastic garbage ends up in the ocean, where exposure to sun and waves weakens its structure and breaks it into countless tiny pieces that are now inundating the oceans. What is misleadingly called a garbage patch is actually more like a soup of tiny particles, often floating just below the surface.
Did you see some increase of the numbers of pieces of plastic over the 22 years of research?
No, in a lot of variability, but no real increase over that time. So the question is, where is that plastic going? And one idea is, of course, it could be the microbes.
And yet, our society is using more and more plastic. Microbes and bacteria may play an important role in breaking down this plastic, but at what price?
It's hard to say whether it's good news or bad news. Is it good news that it's making plastic go away? There are a lot of additives in plastic, and plastic also acts as a bit of a sponge, absorbing toxic chemicals. So you could ask yourself, is it better for those chemicals to stay in one place in the plastic or to be released into the ocean?
If plastic acts like a sponge, where do all those toxins go? Recent scientific studies in the Pacific Ocean estimate that fish consume between 12 and 24,000 tons of plastic every year.
It still isn't exactly clear how much these toxins transfer up the food chain from plastic. There has been some work done to show it does happen, but absolutely, we're polluting the ocean, and then it does stay in the food chain, and then we eat the fish.
We produce about 300 million tons of new plastic every year. Half of this, about 150 million tons, is only used once, then thrown away. Worldwide, less than 10% of the plastic we produce is recycled. The development of plastics began in the 20th century. It is estimated that hundreds of millions of tons of plastic have found their way into the oceans in recent decades. Much of this garbage is still floating today. Plastic in the oceans accumulates in specific areas all over the planet, where the major ocean currents concentrate the floating plastic. These immense vortexes, called ocean gyres, draw in and accumulate garbage over wide areas. This pollution ends up in 5 major ocean basins: the North Atlantic, the South Atlantic and Pacific, the Indian Ocean, and the most well-known ocean gyre, the North Pacific. The Midway Atoll, north of the Hawaiian Islands, seems incredibly remote. But for many Pacific seabird species, it is an important refuge and nesting site. The island's most abundant bird is the Laysan albatross, classified a vulnerable species. They come here to lay their eggs and raise their chicks, far from any predators. But the real threat to the Laysan albatross is much more insidious than any predator.
John, yes? You look at Midway, and it's so remote. It's in the middle of this beautiful Pacific Ocean, and your first thought is it should be pristine, untouched, white sand beaches with nothing on it.
A lot of disturbance.
But instead, we see lots of plastic.
Here, and then just beach disturbance. So it's been a slow.
The winds and the currents of the North Pacific Gyre combine to concentrate plastic in this area. It is not unusual to see the beaches of Midway littered with all sorts of large floating objects, which must continually be collected. But a closer look at the white sand beaches reveals the true catastrophe. Every new wave washes up more tiny particles of plastic and a multitude of garbage that pose a real threat to the island's abundant wildlife. Volunteers come from all over to try and clean up the shores, but the work must be repeated week after week, the result of decades of carelessness and indifference. The same tsunami that hit Japan in 2011 also washed significant amounts of garbage floating in the area onto Midway. The huge wave flooded parts of the island, carrying many large objects far inland. But biologists are more concerned with smaller bits of garbage, transported here not by water, but by air.
The way that plastic is arriving in the interior is that the adult albatross are foraging 1,000 miles or so from here. They're picking up the plastic because they either mistake it for food or food is attached to it. They bring it back here and they regurgitate it to their chicks. And this happens about every 3 days or so this time of year, and the male and female take turns, and they're feeding mainly squid to their chick. You know, it's really difficult to see, but if we look closely, this could be the point where a little bit of plastic is transferring from the adult to the chick.
At some point, some are able to regurgitate a pellet or a bolus and get rid of the plastic, and others don't get rid of it, and as they die, it remains inside their body. This bird is a couple months old, so should we open it up and see if there's plastic inside? Okay, we'll look inside this one and see what we have. And right away we see plastic, yeah. So here's a couple of larger fragments right there. And yeah, so this bit of plastic is definitely part of a larger piece, and some of the plastic might have sharp edges, and they could actually puncture the stomach lining, so that might be a possible cause of mortality for this chick. So it could be the load of plastic plus sharp edges and then contaminants as well that are part of it.
That's probably from a grocery bag or something, you know. What do you think?
Yeah, there's a good chance.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's an interesting piece. We see those occasionally, and we think they're some sort of fishing float, perhaps from Asia, so that's a big item.
Yeah.
Definitely takes up a lot of space. The plastic load in healthy albatross compared to albatross that were found dead, and there was a significant difference, almost twice as much plastic in the birds that died compared to the healthy ones. And so we can't definitively say that plastic kills albatross chicks, but I think what we can say right now is that it is additive to their mortality. Most of the chicks die from dehydration, and so if you think about plastic taking up physical space in the bird's stomach, they have less food, less moisture, and they might be more apt to dehydrate.
Incredible. In 5 or 10 minutes, I collected all this. It's really upsetting. We find a lot of bottle caps and lighters. A lot of lighters. And many floaters like this. They look a lot like what the birds would find. This is a squid without the head. Clearly, they look very much alike. Here's a lighter, and here's a squid. It's not surprising that the albatrosses mix them up.
We see a lot of spacer tubes that are part of the oyster aquaculture industry in Asia or in Japan. So they have these lines that go down, and they have these small little oyster cages. And in order to space them on the line, they have these plastic spacer tubes. And when the line breaks apart, the spacer tubes are all over the ocean. That's pretty common. And I suspect some of the items are so big that they can't regurgitate the pellet. And maybe, again, that's linked back to mortality. If they physically can't get that stuff up, maybe that's another reason why they perish as well. Some of the really surprising things that you find in there, toothbrushes. I mean, you'd think a large toothbrush couldn't be swallowed by an albatross, but it is. Syringes, unfortunately. All sorts of kids' toys are in there, light bulbs, so lots of really interesting things. And if we extrapolate for the entire population, that's about 5 tons of plastic that the adults are feeding to their chicks each year. That's really amazing. Even if we stop putting plastic in the ocean today, it's going to be decades before it's all cleaned up. You know, there's just so much out there. In fact, the gyre where a lot of it concentrates, some people say it's the size of Texas or even twice the size of Texas. So we're talking incredible amounts of items out there and debris.
The age of plastic should have been a revolution for the world. But the invention of nearly indestructible synthetic products has instead become a real menace to the future of the Earth's ecosystems.
Once it goes into the ocean, nobody's figured out the appropriate technique to be able to start to clean up the ocean. We basically have to wait until it reaches land. The best thing that we can do is to make people aware and prevent it from reaching the ocean in the first place.
The solution has to start with us, with our use of plastic, but above all, by how we get rid of our garbage. It's not that complicated. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just have to recycle our plastic. Some missions are harder than others. Coming here to Midway has been pretty tough. Of course, I expected to see plastic from the oceans, but I never thought I would see so much. I think we have gone too far. The oceans are filled with plastic. Each wave brings more, and there are a lot of waves. It's clear that the presence of humans is felt all over the planet now. And unfortunately, I don't mean that in a good way. Sometimes human nature is pretty hard to understand.
Protecting the ocean's great migrators is still a challenge for scientists. We must take inspiration from our successes to build momentum and create the vital wave of change that will determine the future of our world. Today, the humpback whale is undergoing a population boom all over the planet. In calving areas, like the Dominican Republic, calves are being born in greater numbers, helping to secure the future of this species. The reconciliation between our two species is translating into an apparently shared curiosity. No one who has come face to face with a whale has not come away profoundly moved.
Well, the mother came up kind of unexpectedly too, and I didn't know where to go.
She made a full turn. Mais c'est de voir comment.
It's incredible to see how calm and serene they are. You're not scared. You're not scared at all. These are what I call little moments of eternity. They stick in your head, and they're gonna be there forever. It's an amazing feeling.
It was fantastic. I've never had an experience like that before.
Amazing. Amazing.
Incredible. After an experience like that, you can die happy. Incredible.
We have managed to save most whale species from extinction because people mobilized against whaling. We no longer need whale blubber to produce an oil that was once considered irreplaceable. Citizen mobilization may be the salvation of the oceans if we are going to rescue them from the devastating effects of our own consumption habits.
I'm by nature an optimist. I realize it's a very serious problem and it's going to get worse before it gets better, but I'm an optimist that we can at least stabilize the situation.
Hopefully, over time, we can make some positive change and reduce the amount of plastic that's going in the ocean and reduce the amount that albatross are getting. Because ultimately, it's going to affect you and I and all levels of the food chain. We see the same phenomena. The small fish have plastic in them, the small zooplankton, all these different things. So we need to make a difference.
When industrial whaling ended, there were only about 5,000 humpback whales left. Today, there are over 60,000 in the world's oceans, a great conservation success story. When people mobilize, they can accomplish great things. Today, witnessing the magnificent spectacle of the Earth's last giants is certainly one more motivation to conserve the extraordinary biodiversity of our planet.
Our oceans are facing considerable conservation challenges, but with better science, we are beginning to understand them so we can better protect them. The grand spectacle of life continues in all its stunning beauty. But time is running out if we want to preserve the fragile balance of biodiversity. A biodiversity that allows all forms of life to thrive, including our own.
The goal of the mission, 1,000 Days for the Planet, is to document the beauty and fragility of biodiversity on Earth. But we also realize that life in the oceans is truly threatened.
Oceans cover more than 70% of the Earth's surface, and their volume is about 300 times more than land-based environments. So the oceans play a vital role in the balance of life on this planet. Life abounds in the Big Blue in a variety of shapes and colors, ranging from microscopic creatures to the last giants of the world. Unfortunately, our limitless exploitation of the oceans and our savage history with certain resources tell a sad tale. After nearly wiping out whale populations, we have developed ever more sophisticated fishing techniques, which have exerted an unsustainable pressure on ocean resources. Today, it is estimated that 87% of the oceans are overexploited or exploited to their very limits by the fishing industry. Large ocean predators have been especially affected by our insatiable appetite for resources of the sea. It is estimated that 90% of large fish have disappeared in recent decades. Despite their threatened status, the fishing industry still harvests about 65 million sharks each year.
Sharks were long considered an accidental catch or bycatch on longliners, fishing boats that release kilometers and kilometers of fishing line into the sea, aimed primarily at catching large fish. But sharks are no longer a bycatch. Today, they are targeted directly. In the past, there was no market for shark meat, but the recent development of the lucrative Asian market for shark fins has completely changed all that. The consequences for ocean ecosystems are disastrous.
There are recent scientific publications that say that, in general, all marine predators have declined 90% in the last 50 years. So, you know, it's not looking good.
We've invited scientists aboard the Sedna, people who are passionate about what they do and who have dedicated their lives to saving the ocean's large predators.
Biologists Pedro Afonso and Georges Fontes have joined the Sedna IV for this expedition. These scientists from the University of the Azores are also skilled fishermen who are able to catch a shark with a line and hooks specially designed not to hurt the animal. They will team up with Randall Arauz, a scientist and activist who has become well known internationally for his campaigns against shark fishermen, especially those who practice shark finning.
Our first stop was the Azores, in the middle of the Atlantic. It's a place I love. It's filled with history. It's a sailor's paradise. On the beaches, the docks, even in the bars, you can feel the history and smell the sea. Sailors love to stop at the small port of Horta on Fayal Island.
Located on either side of the mid-Atlantic ridge, the Azores archipelago is the result of 20 million years of volcanic activity. The spectacular scenery of the islands, which have emerged only 5 million years ago, continues to evolve and change as a result of volcanoes and the movement of 3 major tectonic plates that meet here. In the oceans, seamounts rise up to the surface, which brings up nutrient-rich waters that feed an impressive diversity of marine life.
In seamounts, you typically have upwelling events, that is, deep water that carries nutrients along the slopes of the seamount to surface or at least to depths where the animals can profit from it. Seamounts not only have more biomass or more animals, they have more species, including the top predators that might be travelers of the ocean, but that might stop on particular seamounts because they have the increased productivity which they can profit from. Everybody goes to the seamounts, including man, of course.
Many migratory species appear to use these seamounts in some phase of their lives. But only recently have scientists discovered the important role played by seamounts around the world.
We could probably try to do that, like again, like at 4
One
o'clock.
of the very first seamounts to be declared worldwide as a marine reserve for scientific purposes, so we can understand the whole process from bottom to top, is the Condor Seamount, which was declared a marine reserve about 3 years ago. And this is just outside our door, which is a fantastic opportunity for all of us, scientists, fishermen, and managers, to understand how these seamounts work so we can better protect them.
The volcanic seamounts in the Azores cause nutrient-rich currents to rise to the surface, which attracts pelagic species such as hammerhead sharks, whose status is precarious and which are increasingly rare in the world's oceans.
Hammerhead sharks are among the most endangered sharks. All pelagic sharks are reduced 90% during the last 50 years, but hammerheads are down 98, 99% in certain areas of the world. So they need a lot of help.
The crew of the Sedna IV hopes to install satellite tags on young hammerhead sharks that seem to use some areas of the Azores as a nursery.
Hammerheads are naturally less abundant because they produce much less offspring to start with. Secondly, they actually make what we call some kind of parental care to their offspring, in the sense that they move to very specific habitats where females think that their pups are gonna have increased chances of survival during their first months and years. So the nurseries of hammerheads are typically located in these very coastal areas, shallow inlets, mangroves in the tropics. In the particular case of this hammerhead species, the smooth hammerhead, we think that oceanic islands such as the Azores might play a crucial role as nursery habitats for the North Atlantic population of this species. In places like the Azores, there has been no historical fishing pressure on hammerhead populations locally, and this continues to be the case, fortunately. However, the adults which live an oceanic lifestyle are also attracted to the longlines, the industrial longline, in open water, and they are indeed a bycatch, a typical bycatch of this fishery. And that is exactly the reason why now ICCAT has mandated the member states to forbid any landing of hammerhead species on the longline fleets. There is an era of research on marine ecology and behavior before the advent of electronic tagging, and another one after the advent of electronic tagging. The capacity of these devices to open windows into the life of these animals and into the significance of particular habitats is just too precious for us to leave it behind.
That's a female.
That's a female.
Stood.
On hold. For years, maybe. Well,
we think this site is a nursery, so we're going to attach an acoustic transmitter to this female so that we can find out whether she comes back next year.
So these guys, they heal really fast, these kind of wounds.
Yeah.
Not having this.
We've attached the acoustic transmitter. We're going to move forward to oxygenate the shark, and then we'll attach the satellite transmitter.
Yeah, you got it? ¿Ya tienes el número de marca?
This satellite tag, called a pop-up, is quite distinctive. After 300 days, the tag will be released and rise to the surface, where it will send all its data to the satellite. This will provide detailed and accurate information about the shark's dives and how deep it went. And if it traveled any long distances during these 300 days, we'll learn that too.
Okay, whenever you want. 1, 2,
head first.
3.
Woohoo!
Without knowing it, this female will be providing scientists with vital data. They'll use it to learn more about her movements and eventually to help put protective measures in place for this extremely threatened species. To study the ocean's great migrators, we must travel great distances. With the same team of biologists, we're headed for Coco Island off the Pacific coast of Costa Rica. Coco Island is a paradise for both biologists and divers who come here from around the world. The marine biodiversity here is exceptional, and it's known for its abundant shark population.
The sharks of Cocos Island migrate between Cocos, Galapagos, and Malpelo, Colombia. So it's really a shared population. This is very important because, of course, we can protect the sharks in Cocos Island as much as we want, but then they're going to go to other islands, and they must be protected there as well. And also, let's say all 3 countries get together and say, okay, we have to protect them more when they're on these 3 islands, but what about when they're migrating in between? So we need the information now on when are the times where the sharks are migrating so that we can design, of course, the corridors.
Our goal is to install a satellite transmitter onto a hammerhead shark. If we're successful, we'll gain a much better understanding of where these sharks go, and we'll be able to suggest protection measures. It's very urgent that we gather accurate data on the sharks' migration routes so that we can adopt effective conservation measures. Catching a hammerhead shark will not be easy. They are very cunning animals, and there are fewer and fewer around Coco Island. And because there are many different kinds of sharks, our bait may attract other species. But it's very important that we get a satellite transmitter onto a shark to better understand how they move around in this area of the Pacific. There are many illegal fishermen around here, and we must put conservation measures into place quickly.
Fortunately, the government of Costa Rica recently increased the protection around Cocos. They're taking stronger actions against the illegal fishermen. I really hope we can curtail all these illegal fisheries and that we can somehow control the uncontrolled fisheries that are happening now in the eastern tropical Pacific, because hammerheads definitely have dropped during this last year.
The decline of shark species is caused by overfishing, prompted largely by the demand for shark fins, which can fetch up to several $100s per kilo.
There is a 12-mile protected zone around Coco Island in which no fishing is allowed. Obviously, the extraordinary biodiversity here attracts many poachers. We see them sitting just outside the 12-mile limit on our radar. The island has a monitoring system, wardens and boats, but they can't do anything when the poachers are outside the park. Yet we know very well that these poachers frequently enter the park because they have no notion of conservation. All they want to do is catch fish and sell it. When they come into the park, they often play a game of hide-and-seek with the park wardens. At night, it's the law of the jungle, and the poachers are much better at the game than the wardens. So at night, out at sea, there's a war going on.
On the island, the evidence of poaching is striking. You see it everywhere. For example, this bridge across a small river was made from fishing buoys seized by park wardens. The director of Cocos Island National Park agreed to talk to us about this serious situation.
This is where we store all the fishing gear. We can see here a number of different kinds of buoys. Do you see how many of them are painted? They do this to make them almost invisible and difficult for us to spot. We keep all the confiscated equipment here. As you can see, there is a lot. It's a big problem because it's all equipment that was set up in protected areas. We manage all of this as garbage. This here is the gear typically used by longliners. These are the lines and hooks used to catch shark. You know that the Cocos Island is also known as Shark's Island. Even our emblem is a hammerhead shark, and they are now an endangered species.
Son especies que están viéndose amenazadas.
There are pressure zones that are between 8 and 10 miles from the coast. The fishermen know when we're coming and sail off. So by the time we reach the point where we first spotted them on radar, they're gone. And that's where we find all this fishing gear. Sometimes they've even had enough time to cut or retrieve their lines by then.
Es decir, ellos en el lapso que tratamos nosotros de llegar hasta ellos, ellos recogieron lo más rápido. Y nosotros decimos que los pescadores.
We say that fishermen are like sly hunters, an exotic species introduced into an environment into which they don't belong. And even though it's a big ocean, the ecosystem around the island is especially rich.
La riqueza está ahí donde están los animales, sí, pero nosotros no podemos tener.
We can't keep the fish in cages to protect them.
Cercados, ¿verdad? Encerrados.
This is where we keep the buoys we retrieve.
Las boyas pelican, ¿verdad? Las boyas pelican prácticamente.
Most of them come from Taiwan, and they paint them so they can sneak past the patrols.
¿Verdad? Si usted ve una boya, nosotros decimos que boya china, pero en realidad es procedente de Taiwán.
Look at the difference. This is one that hasn't been painted, and this is one that has. With the painted ones especially, we can clearly see the intention behind them, to harm the protected area by fishing shark and tuna. We need to reevaluate our strategies to counteract this problem. We're not here just to patrol and protect. We need to take it further and work on reforming our fisheries and navigation laws.
Necesitamos una ley de navegación y es un lugar con mucha vida marina.
This is a magnificent place with a wealth of marine life worth protecting. That is the least we can do with what we have. We must quickly develop new protection measures here in the island and at a national level to protect the resources.
The team of scientists continues its efforts, but the days go by and the large numbers of hammerhead sharks that Cocos Islands is famous for are still missing. The team decides to change the protocol. At this point, any species will do. The scientists must absolutely catch a shark for their research.
Unfortunately, I'm not seeing the same number of hammerhead sharks. I used to see hundreds at the different stations in Manuelita, at Dirty Rock, and Alcion. And about 3 trips ago, last year in September, we came, and there were hardly any sharks, but the water was very warm, and everybody said, well, it's El Nino, the water's warm, the sharks will come back as soon as it gets cold, and okay. But yeah, the water's a lot colder now, and they're not coming back. There was a place like this in Mexico, the Gulf of Cortez, and they had hammerheads just like here, and they wiped them out in the 90s. You know, they can be wiped out.
The scientists have tried everything. They spread blood in the water to attract sharks, use baited buoys, anything to catch a shark.
One particular night was extremely frustrating. We were trying to catch a shark for science, and yet on our radar we saw poachers coming into the park and setting their lines. And they probably had a better chance of catching a shark than we did. There was nothing we could do except alert the wardens. They said they would try to stop them, but we knew very well that their chances of catching the poachers were slim.
So we have a boat.
You see the boat there?
At what distance?
12 miles.
It's about 12 miles away.
It's about 12 miles away. It's leaving the Coco Island National Park limits.
Are you heading right out to look for them?
Yes, we're going straight there.
Earlier, this boat came within 3 miles of ours. Clearly, it was completely inside the park boundary, so the fishing equipment could be just about anywhere. What they do is cast their lines, then leave the park limits.
What they do is cast their lines and then leave the park limits. They'll remain outside at the 12-mile limit, where they cannot be caught.
An important point to explain in all of this is that if we reach them, we will most likely find fishing gear. But unless it's connected to the boat, we cannot prove that it belongs to them.
The fishermen see us patrolling because they have radars like ours. And as soon as we start off towards them, they move further away. And so we can retrieve and confiscate the equipment. But unless the boat is right there, there is no way to prove anything.
So, unless the lines are actually connected to the boat, you can do nothing, even if the lines are only a meter away and full of fish.
Exactly.
For example, we can accuse them of illegal fishing, and 2 or 3 years later, the case will end up in court. But when the judge asked the park ranger if he saw that the lines were connected to the boat, if the answer is no, and the captain denies that the lines were his, then the case is dropped. This is one of the biggest problems we face here in the Coco Island National Park.
We know what the problem is. We just need to change the law so that every fishing buoy is identified with a boat number. That would solve the problem. If a fishing buoy is found inside the park with your boat number on it, you're guilty. Period.
Along along the coast, measures to protect berthing areas are not much better. The team joins another group of scientists in Golfito Bay in Costa Rica. The Tiburon mission team is studying the life cycle of young hammerhead sharks that gather in this bay. The biologists are working directly with some local fishermen to try and provide protection for female hammerhead sharks who give birth in the area.
During the months of July and August is when there is a jump in the number of, specifically, young hammerhead sharks being captured. This just confirms that it's the season in which female hammerheads migrate to the coast. They probably come in May or June and leave their pups to grow in this protected area because it is a safe nursery, rich in nutrients. Here they can live for their first 2 to 4 years until they're adults, until they can make the great migrations to other islands, such as the Malpelo and Galapagos, where adult hammerheads are often seen. This is our reality here in Gulf of Dulce and other areas along the coast of Costa Rica, where the hammerhead shark is often unintentionally caught by fishermen as bycatch.
One of these fishermen has agreed to talk on camera.
On average, how many hammerhead sharks do you catch every day?
Depending on the area, in one day we can catch up to 100, sometimes more. In other areas, none. But whenever they're caught like this, most of them are already dead. Up to 70% are already dead.
These aren't illegal fishermen. They're simple family fishermen trying to make a living. But for 2 months, they fish right in the shark nurseries.
The problem with this species is that it spends most of its time swimming to oxygenate itself. When these sharks get caught in the fishing lines, their movement is limited so they can't breathe and they quickly die. That's why during those months fishing in this area must be prohibited. 63, 48,
macho.
Male.
Es un recién nacido.
It's a newborn. It still has the opening from the umbilical cord.
63.
It's 63 centimeters in length. Hammerheads are born between 50 and 60 centimeters. That male is 2 weeks to a month old, no more than 2 months.
It's ready for relax. Un macho.
An interesting fact is that in the Gulf of Dulce, there are more male than female hammerheads. It may be a strategy to ensure genetic diversity within the species.
Para garantizar la diversidad genética de la especie.
Come on, go! He's stunned, but he'll recover.
The capture of this young tiger shark is not good news. Other endangered species also appear to use the Golfito area to give birth among the mangroves along the coast.
We're trying to protect the adults in their migrations, but we're leaving behind the young in the coastal waters. It's sad because we work hard to try and protect the hammerhead. And when we see these things, we become discouraged. It kills the flame. But at the same time, it's the reason we keep working. We need to know more about them to protect them. We need to work closer with the fishing communities to make their protection a reality. In Puerto Jimenez, there aren't many traditional fishermen, only around 20 to 30 families whose livelihood depend directly on traditional fishing. There are a lot of options in the area. There's a lot of tourism. There are even many other marine species during these months, like whales and dolphins. And these can provide some alternatives, like tourism. We have to work with the fishermen so they understand that the hammerhead is endangered and that these sharks are worth more alive than dead. You're free!
The biologists of Mission Tiburon are doing fantastic work. They raise awareness with young people and fishermen, but it will take more than that. We need laws to protect the sharks' birthing sites and nurseries for these 2 critical months of the year. And we need to find a way to financially compensate the 20 or so fishing families during this period. It shouldn't be that hard. It probably costs more to send scientists somewhere in the world to meet 2 or 3 times to try and understand the problem than it does to implement real measures to compensate these fishermen. But we must absolutely find a way to protect the zones during these 2 critical months. The conservation problems in our oceans are caused mainly by overfishing. Governments know it, and scientists have been saying it for years. Even worse, scientists are saying that we have maybe 40 or 50 years to change our ways, or fish stocks will collapse. So if the overfishing problem isn't solved early in this century, there will be no more fishing at all by the end of the century.
Longline fishing is non-selective, and every year its bycatch kills a huge number of non-commercial fish, turtles, birds, and other species. One longliner can deploy up to 100 kilometers of line equipped with thousands of baited hooks. This type of fishing primarily targets large fish, such as swordfish, which are a good source of income for fishermen. But overfishing has reduced stocks to the point where revenues are not sufficient to cover the cost of the industry. The significant decline in swordfish populations has forced the industry to develop new markets. Long considered bycatch, sharks were once thrown back due to their low value. But the growth of the lucrative shark fin market has changed the strategy of the industry.
There's very little known about sharks, and shark science only started until the 90s. And I think all shark scientists now share the concern that we're running out of sharks, and we really need to work together to generate the information we need and to get the political change we need. And
one day, Randall managed to get a friend hired on as a cook on a fishing boat. The images he took documented for the first time what happens at sea, far from prying eyes. The footage shows turtles and all sorts of bycatch, but the most disturbing images are of what happens to the sharks. These were the first images of what's called shark finning. In its most barbaric form, the shark is brought on board, its fins and tail cut off, and then it's thrown back to the sea, often still alive. Obviously, without its fins and tail, the animal can no longer swim and circulate water through its gills, so it dies an agonizing death by suffocation. It's a cruel practice, and these images galvanized public opinion.
First of all, it's a cruel, painful death for these magnificent animals. From a more technical point of view, it's unsustainable. They're wiping out marine biodiversity so that a culture on the other side of the world can have their shark fin soup.
These images of shark finning helped raise public awareness, and some countries now ban the practice. But this has not stopped shark fishing altogether.
What happened is that a new market has been created. Many countries now require fishermen to keep the shark carcasses. In a way, by creating a market for shark meat, we have legalized a once condemned practice, but nothing has really changed. We're putting even more pressure on shark populations.
The way fisheries are controlled out here in the open sea, it's no man's land. It's everyone take all. Everything is for free. And that isn't changing yet. And I think that is something that many countries have to work on. The United States, the Economic Union, Australia, which is a big fishing nation. And, you know, we need to get together and change the way fishery policy is established. We have a very interesting relationship with the government of Costa Rica. However, we have a very bad relationship with the Costa Rican Fisheries Institute. The Fishery Institute is an autonomous institute, which means it's not part of the central government. And since it's autonomous, they are not ruled by the president. They are ruled by a board of directors. And guess who's on the board of directors? Shark finners, shrimp trawlers, tuna purse seiners. So they're all there not to establish public policy. They're there to protect their own private interests. What we need is fisheries directed with science in mind. How many boats can fish this resource? When should we stop fishing? Where should we not fish? Then even if it hurts somebody's pocket, we must stop fishing.
The fishing fleets have grown in the past decades dependent on subsidies from governments. That is, the real cost involved in sending a fishing vessel out there with all the costs in fuel, in gear, in paying the crewmen, etc., is just not overturned by the real profit that the catch is going to make in the market. And the only reason why that fleet or that particular vessel is doing its everyday fishing is because it gets subsidies from all of us taxpayers to lower the cost of those items. If we would be to take all the subsidies to the fishing fleets all over the world, and in particular in developed countries, most of those fleets would stop the day after.
By creating a new market for shark bait, the fishing industry is committed to using much of the resource. But at 63 euro cents per kilo, less than $1, some wonder whether this new market for shark bait is not simply a cover for continuing the lucrative trade in shark fins. The effort to catch a shark off Cocos Islands continues. Time is passing, and the scientists are redoubling their efforts. Pedro and George have been working day and night. There's no question of giving up. They can't leave empty-handed. The stakes are too high.
If we want to effectively protect and conserve these highly migratory species, we need to figure out where the critical habitats are located, whether they are for mating purposes, for spawning purposes, or for juvenile growth purposes. This is the main issue.
Finally, after many attempts, they catch one. It's not a hammerhead, but the team can still track its movements and learn the migration routes of this Galapagos shark.
Vertebrates in general have this thing called the tonic immobility reflex, which basically is when you're turned upside down, you become numb. And they get really amenable to work with. And we think that they also get a decreased pain function. We do that to promote natural anesthesia. Okay.
Yeah, wherever.
That's the tag.
This is a female Galapagos shark. They just installed an acoustic tag inside it. This issues a sound that can be heard 500 meters around, and this tag will work for at least 5 years. So we expect to get some really good data because the tag is implanted inside the animal, so we're sure it's not going to be lost. Yeah, go for it.
Quick action is needed. The scientists install the satellite tag.
Okay, bottom one. Let's just keep going for a while.
Yeah.
Well, the shark looks a little tired, and it's already been hooked for a few minutes, and I'm just a little concerned that the time it'll take to deploy the satellite transmitter on it might be a little too long. It is very invasive, but then at the same time, the information you get out of a single animal is so valuable compared to using other type of tags. But on the other hand, it's very invasive, and yeah, you have to act fast.
Usually, after the first stage of the operation, we turn the shark over and move the boat to oxygenate the animal. This revives it from its comatose state. But this shark wasn't reacting. We began to get anxious.
Okay, so see, these are
okay,
walking,
yes.
so
that direction is
they're
good.
holding now. Yeah, Daniel, you pull it in, yeah? You're the man.
All right.
right, the hook is off.
See, we're learning. Okay, it's going. It's going.
In the end, it was just a scare. The female Galapagos shark regained her senses and swam off with the transmitter. So she will provide a lot of essential data for scientists.
In the days that follow, divers managed to install acoustic transmitters on other shark species, including one of the few hammerhead sharks spotted around Cocos Island.
This glimpse into the world of sharks and fishing really makes you think. Scientists have identified most of the problems, and solutions do exist. But if we want to save these threatened species, what's missing is a willingness to implement those solutions. This will probably mean making sacrifices and changing our consumption habits so we can change the model and build a different relationship with the oceans. If we want to preserve what remains of our oceans, we'll have to pay the price for our past abuses.
I think there is no miracle solution to the biggest problem of all, which is how are we going to give food to everybody while wild fish are just going low and low in numbers. There is two main hopes in our capacity to solve that. One is aquaculture, but we also know that aquaculture has a lot of environmental and even social problems associated with it, and we need to solve those. And the other is obviously a more sustainable management of global fishing in the world. And that might take the exploitation of lower trophic chain resources, which can still give good protein to people and release a little bit our pressure on the top levels. So balanced harvesting is becoming a major hope in the fisheries science arena.
We talk about sharks are going extinct, how important they are for the ecosystem, and we go to meetings and we go to conventions and we design strategies, and then we have meetings to see what went wrong with the strategy, and then another meeting to push the strategy again, and this time it is going to work, So all this talk and talk and talk, but no action. Apparently we don't have time. Scientists are saying we have another 40 or 50 years before it's all depleted. In our lifetime, we may see this big dramatic change, and let's hope we can stop it. We need everybody's help.
There are serious conservation challenges, but I'm optimistic. When humanity mobilizes, we can accomplish great things. We mustn't forget that everything on Earth is interconnected. We depend on other species for our own survival. If we can change the way we coexist with other species, I'm convinced we can get there. We can do it, I'm sure. I have always been fascinated by the ocean. Throughout this expedition, our divers have shared the sea with extraordinary but often little-known fish, corals, plants, and animals. But for me, the most mythical and deeply touching inhabitants of the deep are whales.
The team has headed to the Silver Bank off the coast of the Dominican Republic in the Caribbean Sea. Every year in winter, humpback whales return to this protected shoal to breed and give birth.
It's a magnificent place where one can slip into the whale's environment and share their world. There are few places on the planet like this where we can draw back the curtain on their lives. By spending time with these whales, we can better understand them and ultimately better protect them.
There are few places where humans can share the underwater world of the last giants on Earth. But access to the Silver Bank Sanctuary is strictly controlled. Only 3 boats have permits to observe humpback whales during the breeding and calving season. The crew has left the Sedna IV to join the Sun Dancer, a ship that has plied these waters for many years. It takes about 12 hours to reach the sanctuary. For this expedition, 2 leading experts on whales have joined mission leader Jean Lemire. Richard Sears, who travels the world to study whales, and Sal Sergio, who began his career as a biologist on Silver Bank. After nearly 30 years, Sal and Richard are back on Silver Bank with the same passion and desire to study whales.
The idea of coming here back then was to gather all the scientists from the Northeast who were working on humpback whales, from the St. Lawrence to Newfoundland and Labrador to New England, together on Silver Bank. When I found out about it, I was naturally thrilled to take part and come observe where these whales go in the winter. It was the first time that we really focused on photo identification of humpback flukes to find out where all the whales on Silver Bank were coming from.
I was here 28 years ago, and when the opportunity to come back to Silver Bank arose, there was no way I could resist. On that trip, it just so happened that there were several major scientists that were currently doing work with humpback whales. So I got quite lucky to be involved in a project of that level. And I was on the breeding grounds of humpback whales in the North Atlantic, one of the most densest aggregations on the planet.
Scientists like to go where the whales are abundant. Doing research far at sea is extremely difficult, so where there are a lot of whales, you'll often find an abundance of scientists too.
Jean and Richard are old research colleagues. From the Sea of Cortez to Iceland to the Gulf of St. Lawrence in Canada, they have worked together to photograph different species of whales around the world. Photography is the basis of whale research. Patterns of skin pigmentation are unique to each animal, which allows them to be recognized and told apart. This is essential to studying their behavior.
This is an example of a humpback photo ID. It's like a fingerprint. They are kind enough to lift their fluke when they dive, and the pattern on the underside of the tail is unique for each animal. It can vary from completely black to completely white.
Totalement noir, totalement blanc. We learn
about the species by studying individuals, and there are now huge photo ID catalogs of humpback populations around the world. Now that the catalogs have been digitized, when we get to a place where someone has taken pictures of humpbacks, we can attempt to find a match and identify the individual using a simple computer or even an iPad.
Photo identification has helped pinpoint the main gathering sites of humpbacks around the world. The discovery of Silver Bank, the humpback's main breeding site in the Atlantic, is a result of this collaboration between different research teams. In the Pacific, humpbacks gather around the Hawaiian Islands in winter to breed and give birth.
When I was much younger, I had the privilege of working in Hawaii for several winters. I had a scientific permit to swim with the whales and study their behavior during the breeding season. It was fascinating work. This underwater world is so foreign to us. We know so little about it, but we think that the whale's reproductive strategy revolves around the females. Males are often aggressive toward each other, and we sometimes witness intense combats to win the favors of a female. The male closest to the female is called the escort. He is constantly confronted by other males called challengers. They want to get close to the female to mate with her. This can lead to violent combats. But this is all hypothesis. No one has ever witnessed humpback whales mating. The same goes for calving. We do not yet have convincing visual proof. I remember one day I filmed the erect penis of a male approaching a female. The footage has become popular because it's not something you see every day. But spectacular as it was, it didn't prove a thing. It's all hypothesis. There are clues, but in science, you need irrefutable proof. There were situations where we were surrounded by 10 or 15 males fighting amongst each other, and it was tense at times. But they are among the most memorable moments of my career. In recent decades, scientists have made their most important scientific discoveries about whales at winter gathering areas like the Dominican Republic.
The seasonal gatherings of humpbacks on breeding grounds give scientists a chance to accumulate a large amount of data on the various subpopulations.
It's marvelous to monitor a group over a long distance on Silver Bank. I couldn't have imagined it any better when Jean spoke to me about returning here. It's amazing to watch this group of active males on the surface.
That's a baby breach.
The clear water at Silver Bank lets scientists share the whale's underwater world. This protected shoal is shallow, making it easier to observe and study whale behavior throughout the water column. Mothers and calves are much calmer than males, who often engage in combat. They don't move around much, allowing biologists to observe the interactions between mother and calf.
Wow. Yeah, did you see the way the calf was let go by the mother?
Yeah.
Just came right up to the surface. She stayed down there, and then she came up and goes,
amazing.
Calves are often reckless. In a spirit of mutual curiosity, the mother allows the scientists and her offspring to interact.
Mother came up kind of unexpectedly too, and I didn't know where to go.
You're not scared. These are what I call little moments of eternity. They get etched into your memory forever.
It was fantastic. I've never had an experience like that before.
Amazing, amazing.
How we doing?
I wish I had the car right. And she just came up and breezed through there without touching any of us.
I would have touched her pectorals and I would have had it.
Yeah.
Right there.
You would have touched what?
The mother allowed her curious calf to approach us. It was no more than 3 months old. The mother was calm and watchful. If the calf came too close, she would just come over and turn. And we were sort of trapped between the calf and the mother. Daniela wound up right over the mother's back, but she didn't move. And it was the mother who moved off. Not far, maybe 100 feet, and then returned to the bottom. The calf moved under the mother. Really, it was the perfect situation.
In our experience working in Mexico, the whales aren't as curious and they're not as tolerant. So we can approach them in the boat, but they don't come over and check us out and go under the boat and look at us and approach us more in the water. That was completely new.
Yeah. No, it was fantastic. And also it was so long. I mean, sometimes you get in with whales and you get a nice gift for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but this went on for hours. And we'd get out, and this time we were able to stay in a good long amount of time. It's been a really nice moments.
Incredible. With encounters like that, you can die happy tomorrow. Incredible. It's the very end of the season, so there are a lot of very active males in large groups. We want to study the relationship between the escort and the challengers. The escort is the male closest to the female, and all the other males fight to get as close to the female as possible. Amidst all this action are a few isolated males who decide to sing. We'll put the hydrophone in the water and hear many singers because the songs carry well in the water. But the hard part is isolating one. It's challenging, but we probably have the best people on board for it, so with a bit of luck, we'll be successful.
Right now we're searching for a singer. It's kind of like looking for a needle in a haystack. And what we want to do is keep moving, listening each time we move to look for a single individual singer to get louder and louder. And once it gets louder from one stop to another, we know we're moving in the right direction, and then we can start to look for him on the surface.
Finding a lone male singer among groups of humpback whales is a real challenge. Scientists must identify certain parts of the song, long, prolonged growls, that mean the male is about to surface. They then scan the horizon for the whale's spout on the surface and try to approach the male slowly to avoid any kind of disturbance.
When you find your singer, you're ecstatic. When you slip into the water with him, the song is so powerful that your internal organs vibrate. It's hard to describe. It's simply extraordinary. Just like human songs, humpback whale songs are organized into verses and refrains. The song changes over the course of a year, but the amazing thing is that at some point, all the males end up singing the same song. We don't understand exactly how this happens, but it's extraordinary. And what's even more incredible, listen to what happens if we speed up the song. Here, we've sped it up 14 times. Listen. It's very much like the structure of birdsong in its complexity. It's just that humpback whales sing very, very slowly. It's fascinating.
Song in the humpback whale is a major part of a breeding system and the role it plays in the breeding system. So it attracts a lot of attention because of the emotional attachment that people have with song. And that's both on the level of what we as humans come to, what song is all about. Song is an incredible aspect of every single culture. It's a very important aspect of every single culture on the planet.
This song changes throughout the breeding season. In spring, when the whales begin their long migration north, the males stop singing. The singing of males is often associated with courtship, a sort of seductive serenade to attract females. But this is just a theory. Despite significant advances in the understanding of whale behavior, the exact function of the humpback song remains a mystery.
At any given time, all males in a group sing essentially the same or very similar songs. they change the song over time. It's a gradual and progressive change. And all whales within a group change their song in the same ways. So they're learning from each other. And the last remarkable aspect of it is that within an ocean basin, animals that have contact at some point in time are sharing those songs and sharing those changes and changing in the same way.
Scientists still do not understand how males share the same song. They also wonder how the song is transmitted over long distances, well beyond the hearing range of a single group gathered in the same area. But beyond science, the incredible emotion produced when you experience this unique phenomenon is perhaps its greatest mystery. With the arrival of spring begins the long migration north. After fasting during the breeding season, it is time for the whales to head to the rich waters of the northern latitudes. Photo identification and satellite tags have identified different feeding sites in the Atlantic, ranging from the coast of New England up to Iceland and even Norway. In the Pacific, humpback whales migrate too. They leave the breeding area of Hawaii and head to Alaska to feed. Some whales in this area of the Pacific have developed a truly special feeding technique. Rather than feed alone, some humpbacks form groups to capture their prey, the herring that school in the rich waters of Alaska in summer. These whales have developed a shrill feeding call, which they use to synchronize their assault on schools of fish. They also use bubbles expelled from their blowholes to create a sort of net. The feeding call frightens the herring, while the bubble net herds them together. The work of biologist Fred Sharp has helped to understand this truly unique fishing technique, one used only by a small number of humpback whales.
I worked with Fred Sharp here in Alaska a long time ago. I think it was 1996. We were trying to film everything on the surface to understand what was going on. At the same time, we had hydrophones in the water to try to understand who was doing what in the groups. Later, this work formed the basis for many well-known studies.
I arrived in Alaska in 1987, and I came up as a naturalist and saw my first bubble net and never looked back. I guess the most important thing I've learned about these humpback whales is that they're all incredible individuals. Each one seems to have its own story. It's a story that may last up to a century. They have their own ways of feeding. They have their own friends, their own places they call home. And that's been the most wonderful part, is just learning the tremendous lives of these whales. The humpback whale in southeast Alaska is truly one of our most abundant and amazing backyard predators. Almost all of them are from Polynesia, the Hawaiian Islands. And they come up here in May, and they'll spend 6 to 8 months feeding on herring and krill. And then around Christmas time, they head back to the islands of Hawaii and complete their amazing life cycle.
Right there, right there.
Hold this position.
Captain, should we move a little bit to have the photo ID of this one?
That's just phenomenal.
He's gonna die.
There he goes.
Great.
The idea is to be as perpendicular to the fluke as possible. Each fluke has a distinctive pigmentation pattern that allows us to photo ID the animals. It is important to be able to identify individual whales, because if we want to study their behavior, we have to be able to tell the individuals apart. All body marks are important, so we try to take a lateral photograph of the dorsal fin and then one of the fluke. That way, we can be sure that we get the ID right. And if we're ever in shallow water and the whales don't show their tails, we also have the dorsal fin as a reference.
How many animals do you have in your catalog?
About 1,000.
1,000?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, pretty big. Jan's got about 2,000, and the park, there's probably about 3,000, 3,500 animals for the northern Southeast Alaska. A few Guadalajarans come up, a few Mexicans, a few Asiatics show up once in a while, but...
Mainly Hawaii?
Yeah, almost all Hawaiian. Bubbles.
Bubble, right
here. See that nice softball side?
Yeah.
And the classic. Now those are the ones that really scare the fish the most. Bigger, faster, they reflect more light, they make a lot more noise. Those are the real workhorse of the bubble net. And it looks like this one animal looks like it might be going in a counterclockwise circle. That's kind of interesting. About 90% of the animals blow in a clockwise circle.
Oh, yeah.
And it's remarkable in that it's the same level of handedness or laterality that humans have. So it's another striking similarity between humpback whales and humans.
Here we are, barren off, warm spring. So what's the plan, Fred?
Well, I figure we're gonna have a lot of fog this morning, so what do you think, Cap? You feel comfortable navigating in these fogs?
Oh yeah, yeah. This is not a problem. It's supposed to burn off by midday, and it's actually I think it already is starting to burn off a little bit.
So I figure good time for running north, and hopefully things will burn off by the time we get up to the confluence of Peril Strait and Chatham, and that's why we probably got 3-4 hours to get up there.
When we arrived by plane, we saw, good group of whales around Parker Point.
Right.
So, it's close to Lagoon. So.
Yeah. Typically, there's a lot of herring schools still in this area at this time of the year, and it's been kind of an unusual year. Seems like the herring have sort of picked up and moved out of Dodge, and so in some ways we're looking for the prey as much as we are the whales.
We have the weather on our side, so let's move.
We do. The humpbacks feed in a remarkable variety of ways. And the krill, these small shrimp-like crustaceans, they're quite easy for the whales to catch, and so most of the time when they're feeding on the krill, they can do it alone. Typically they hunt the krill by just swimming up to a school and opening their mouth and engulfing them. They'll laterally lunge, they'll roll to the surface, they will lunge up through them, but they will use a whole variety of techniques.
Amazing. There's whales everywhere. Everywhere.
Hey, he's yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was great.
Amazing.
So that's your friend.
Beautiful animal. It's funny that he is so friendly. Did you see on his tail where he had ropes? He'd been in nets before.
Yeah.
He has been insulted by humanity, but yet he comes over to be to be curious and interactive. It's amazing. It's almost like forgiveness.
Yeah, it's wow.
On such a beautiful evening, too.
Yeah, perfect.
There's his footprint.
Yeah.
What do you suppose? He just curious? He just
curious.
Just
yeah.
wanted to know who we are and what's up.
Yeah.
And
We are with a very curious whale, one that keeps passing right under our boat. And what's amazing is that it comes very close and then turns slightly to look at us. It's done this 3 or 4 times.
And see, again, instead of chasing the whale,
yeah,
you just wait and you're attacked.
That's right. Couldn't have said it better, Massan. Couldn't have said it better.
Going under, going under.
Hello, hello. Thanks for coming back.
It's gonna be near you, Captain.
Thanks for the fluke ID. Nice. Amazing.
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 Yeah, coming right here, right here. Look on the side.
He's rolling over.
Rolling.
Wow. Yeah.
They know exactly what they're doing. They swim around the boat and turn to look at us. This one rolled right on its side to really get a good look at us. It's hard to know why they do it, but one thing is sure. It's very much a conscious act.
You know, I've just been so incredibly curious about them for, you know, a quarter of a century, and it's nice to finally think they want to know a little bit about us. It's really touching, and it's really, it's kind of a gift.
Yeah.
And they share so many similarities with humans. Their brain is gigantic, and it's laced with spindle neurons, and in humans, those are associated with language acquisition, social intelligence, and compassion. And we see a lot of compassionate acts with humpback whales, the way they'll protect their young if there's predators around, and they'll come to each other's aid, and just general interspecies interest. It's a sense of higher cognitive function.
Yeah.
The weather has taken a turn for the worse, so it will be harder to work now. Today we hope that the whales we saw yesterday, individually using bubbles to feed down deep, will come together at the surface so we can observe them using this technique as a group when the attacks are synchronized with song. It's truly spectacular.
Calling the Washington State Ferry Fairweather. This is the Wayfinder. Do you copy 16?
This is the State Ferry Fairweather, WDB 5604. Back to the call.
Okay, Fairweather. We kindly wanted to inquire about any number of cetaceans, particularly humpback whales, that you might have seen in your journey through Peril Strait. Over.
At 11:03, we saw them bubble net feeding just inside between Pavarotti and Light 22. And at 14:30, we spotted a couple of whales, but there wasn't a lot of bird activity, and we didn't see any bubble feeding on our way, this direction.
Well, thank you so much, and kindly, if you, in your further journeys, come across any more significant numbers of bubble net feeding humpback whales, we'd really appreciate to hear from you.
Roger.
The people of Alaska know whales and their behavior. This is an asset for Fred Sharp, who must travel great distances to find the whales that use this particular feeding technique. The observations received from the ferry now guide the boat to a small, isolated inlet.
These whales are hungry, and They're looking for food. They're cruising the strip. They're looking to mix it up. They need about half a ton of food a day. And humpbacks have this large trick-or-treat bag made out of spandex on their tummy. And they feed by engulfing big chunks out of the ecosystem every time they feed.
It's almost night. They normally, slow down at this time of the day, right?
Well, this is very typical. About this time of the evening, the whales, the rate with which they're feeding slows down. They seem to lose the beat on the herring. The fish are more scattered out, and they move out to mid-channel where they can get their sea room and have plenty of space, ocean moorage, and they go to sleep. And they get a good night's sleep, so they're ready to get at it in the morning.
Before night sets in, Fred and Jean have photo ID'd a small group of feeding whales. This is standard procedure, almost a reflex for researchers who use cameras as a primary research tool. But that night, an examination of the photographs reveals something unexpected. A wonderful surprise that also demonstrates the effectiveness of photo identification. An old friend has reappeared.
I think that might be Trumpeter.
Yeah, we found him. And great news, if it's Trumpeter, we know that's a good leader.
Yeah.
Very good leader.
Trumpeter and Jan are big old friends.
Yes.
They go way back.
Oh, yeah.
Remember back in 1996?
Yep.
Here's our friend Trumpeter.
Yeah.
And you can compare it to what we obtained on this voyage. And what do you think?
Yeah, that's a match. Look, that little thing here. Same pigmentation pattern.
Nice serrated trailing edge. And here's why we call him Trumpeter. The most amazing sounds. Makes the most brilliant low. It starts out with this nice low, steady, and then he just goes off the scale. It's like you're saying Miles Davis.
Nice.
In the morning, Trumpeter, the humpback whale first identified in 1996, was waiting for them.
Nice. Trumpeter again. Yep, you were right.
That's him, eh?
Yeah, it's amazing. God, it's like...
In 96, Trumpeter was leading a big group, and he was really, active, and he was the one who was starting the feeding call, doing the bubbles and everything, and always going very high compared to the other, right in the middle.
You know, he disappeared from the database for like 7 years, and we thought he'd gone to the great bubble net in the sky, but he's back and leading Team Bubble Net. That should be plenty deep. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, nice and loud. The feeding calls that the humpbacks produce appear to be unique here in Southeast Alaska. Everywhere you go, it seems like they have their special nuances, but here in Alaska, we're richly rewarded by these loud, beautiful feeding calls, larger groups with more stable, enduring friendships. Oh, nice feeding call. Clear, pure. I mean, it hurts my ears. I sit in the lab and listen to this hour after hour, and it's like, after a while, it's like, this is crazy.
Do they start the feeding call first and the bubble after, or?
Seems to be a lot of variation there. Yeah, a lot of individual style, but typically we'll hear the bubbles and the feeding call start about the same time. Oh, now you can hear the bubbles coming up. You hear that? Deploying the bubble net, percolating it out of the blowhole as far as we know.
These Alaskan whales have developed a unique feeding technique in which whales cooperate to capture prey. After more than 15 years, scientists have concluded that trumpeter is still a leader among the whales, often sounding the charge and commanding the troops.
Those sounds that you're hearing, those are the whales diving below the herring schools and producing these incredibly loud, annoying sounds. It's almost like turning a fire alarm on a building and all you want to do is run for the exits. Well, that's what the whales are doing. And one whale going in usually a clockwise fashion, and the bubbles rise up and effervesce and create this amazing corral. It's almost like a rocket tube that the whales then come shooting up and engulf the prey at the surface. The increase of humpback whales, both here in the Pacific and throughout the world, is one of the best conservation success stories. And it's remarkable to see how humans can, exhibit concern for the environment and then show some conservation wisdom. And we're richly rewarded to see the humpbacks returning to all these waters. I don't think we'll ever start hunting the humpback whales in a large manner again. I think they're just too beloved and too many people care about them. And I think there's many other concerns, climate change, ocean acidification, pollution, acoustic sounds bothering them. There's many, many concerns, but I don't think the harpoon is one of them.
The complexity of whale song is an exquisite example of how nature and evolution have shaped living things to exist in balance with their environment. It took millions of years to create this balance, so more than ever, it's vital that we do everything we can to protect the living heritage of our planet, so that whale song can go on delighting our children and our children's children.